Аудиоприложение к учебнику английского языка для 9 класса, школ с углубленным изучением английского языка. Авторы Виктория Викторовна Сафонова, Ирина Петровна Твердохлебова.
Hello and welcome to your new audio cassette. This cassette accompanies the material in your course book for the 9th form. The recordings are arranged into sections, each coinciding with the chapters of the book. The topics of the tape contain interesting and stimulating material. The main aim of the recordings is to provide you with an ample opportunity to improve your listening skills, especially listening for gist and listening for specific information. On this tape, you will hear a variety of accents and speaking styles used by different personalities. In case you find the recording difficult for comprehension, you may either play the recording again or listen to it following the script of the recording with your eyes. The scripts are provided in an exercise as mentioned and in a supplement at the back of the book. We hope that you will enjoy working with the tape. Best of luck from the authors. Unit 1. The Young Writers Club. Task 1.1. Summer is supposed to be a time of fun and sun, but sometimes it can be a nightmare. Listen to Gwen Platt's summer story and discover what kind of holiday the girl had.
My parents had booked a holiday for the whole family in Spain. I was really looking forward to it. It was my first holiday abroad. When we arrived at the hotel, my dad went to the front desk to check in. After about 10 minutes of looking for our names, the man told my dad he couldn't find our reservations, and perhaps we had made a mistake and booked into a different hotel. My dad was starting to get angry, and I was worried that we might have to go back home. We didn't have enough money with us to book into another hotel. Eventually, the hotel contacted the travel agent, and they discovered that they'd double booked. We were told that nothing could be done about it, and we would get our money back, but only when we were back in England. So there we were, stranded in Spain, with nowhere to go. We ended up in a family-run hotel which had no proper running water, was infested with cockroaches, and the sheets made you itch like mad. And, to top it all, the whole family came down with food poisoning, and my mum got her purse hicked. It was the worst holiday I'd ever had.
Task 1.2. Play the recording again and say what had turned Gwen Platt's dream holiday into a disaster. Fill in table on page 5 in your course book. Task 1.3. Listen to the end of the story, Cool School by John Marston, and say whether you find the story realistic or unrealistic. Which of the teacher's actions can you justify? Which of the teacher's actions you don't approve of? Explain why.
Gee, you've talked Sam into it, though you half wish you hadn't. Still, it's time you used your electronics knowledge for something. You give Sam the easy job of getting information, and by the next morning, it's done. It's all there. Ms. Jansen's desk is third from the door in staff room 2. Pretty impressive, Sam, you say after studying the info. Later that morning, you ask permission to leave class. Once you're out in the corridor, you race off to staff room 2. You knock on the door and wait. There's no answer. That's cool. If there had been, you just would have tried again later, and again, and again, and again, until the staff room was empty. You're a persistent person. Inside the staff room, you quickly locate the third desk from the door. You find Ms. Jansen's phone, too. You unscrew the base and attach the gadget you bought last night. Then you fit the base back on and get out of the room fast, racing into the little booth next to the office where they make the announcements. A bit of work there, then it's back to the classroom. Feel much better now, sir, you pant to the teachers as you sit down, giving a nod and a wink to Sam to show you've succeeded. Sam goes white and dives into a large science textbook. Nothing happens until mid-afternoon. You're in an art lesson when there's a sudden crackle of static over the loudspeakers. No one takes any notice. There's a constant stream of dumb announcements over the speakers all day long, but this time it's different. You hear the ringing of an amplified phone. People listen in surprise. Then you hear a man's voice. "Hello?" he says. "Hello, my sweet little butterfly, my darling cutie pie," says Miss Jensen. "Hello, my twinkling star." Her voice sounds like she's soaked it in sugar and honey for about an hour and a half. "Why, hello, my lovely Barbie doll," the man replies. This is the first announcement in the history of education that everyone's actually listening to. Even the teacher is listening. She almost looks like she's smiling. "Are you having a smoothie-woothie day?" Miss Jensen asks. The conversation continues like this for a couple of minutes. The students are in convulsions. Several of them have to leave the room. There's a squelch noise and silence. Seems like someone's finally pulled the plug. Next morning, there's a huge witch hunt to find the person who connected the phone to the amplifier. The heat's off Sam, who's gone on camp for a week. But you are certainly feeling the pressure. You start wondering whether you should maybe even confess, especially when they start talking about a mass punishment for the whole school.
Task 1.4. Listen to a person comparing school education in Britain and in the USA, and complete the table in task 15 on page 14 of your course book.
In Britain, all children go to school between the ages of 5 and 16. In the USA, children must go to school from the age of 6 to between the ages of 14 and 16, depending on the state they live in. Most British children attend state schools at all levels. These are usually called primary school and secondary school. In primary school, there are 6 forms, and the secondary school includes 5 forms. In the USA and Scotland, a free local school, controlled and paid for by the state, is called public school. Public school consists of elementary school, where children study for 6 years, junior high school, and high school, including 4 grades. There are also private schools in Britain and the USA, where children usually live as well as study. Private schools are expensive and attended usually by people of high social status or with a lot of money. Some private schools are run by or connected with the church. In the USA, they are known as parochial schools. In England and Wales, the subjects taught in schools are laid down by the national curriculum. The national curriculum does not apply in Scotland, where each school decides what subjects it will teach. In the USA, the subjects taught are decided by national and local governments. At 16, students in England and Wales take GCSE examinations. These examinations are taken by students of all levels of ability in any of a range of subjects. At 18, some students take A-level examinations, usually in not more than 3 subjects. It is necessary to have A-levels in order to go to a university or polytechnic. In Scotland, students take the SCE examinations. A year later, they can take examinations called Highers, after which they can either go straight to a university or spend a further year at school and take the certificate of 6th year studies. In the USA, school examinations are not as important as they are in Britain. Students in high schools do have exams at the end of their last 2 years, but these final exams are considered along with the work that the students have done during the school years. American high school students who wish to go to college also take SATs, national examinations. A student's SAT results are presented to colleges when students apply for entry, along with a record of the student's achievements at high school.
Task 1.5. Listen to a girl talking about her dream and say why she wants to become a writer.
I believe that my life is boring because I'm not doing anything creative. If I were a writer, my life wouldn't be boring at all. If I were a writer, I would observe other people from morning till night and make notes on what happens in their life, and then I would describe their life. But some people's life is not interesting at all. If I think about writing a book, I should find out what people like to read about. If I really knew what is a suitable subject for my book, I could write a bestseller. If I wrote a bestseller, I would earn enough money to start an endless travel around the world. If I could afford travelling around the world, I would start with European countries, then I would visit African countries, then I would move to Australia and New Zealand, and I would end up with Asian and American lands. If I had an opportunity to visit many countries, I could write guidebooks for other people, and if I wrote good guidebooks for other people, they would feel comfortable in any country they are visiting. And then they would always enjoy their visits to foreign lands, because sometimes lack of cultural knowledge spoils our visits to other countries. If I were a writer, I wish I were a writer.
Task 1.6. Edward Tall is going to visit Mikhailovskaya next summer. Why is this visit of special significance to him? Has he ever been to Mikhailovskaya before? What particular information does Edward want to find out? It will be my second time in Russia next year, so I'd like to see some of the places outside Moscow and St. Petersburg, though I was greatly impressed by both cities last time I was in Russia. I haven't made any detailed plans about my trip yet. I've just made a list of places that might be of interest to me. Mikhailovskaya is one of them. As I study Russian literature and history, I'd like to visit the estate where Alexander Pushkin lived, worked, and is buried. I would like to pay tribute to him and his genius. I wonder how far away from Moscow his estate is and how long it might take me to get there. Should I take a train, or is there some other convenient way of getting there? Is the estate well preserved? Is it used as a venue for some literary events? When is the best time to travel to Mikhailovsk? Are there any other places of historical and cultural heritage nearby Pushkin's estate? I'll sincerely appreciate your help in giving answers to my questions. Unit 2. The Sport Fans Club. Task 2.1. You will hear some teenagers talking about their hobbies. Listen to the tape and say what each speaker is keen on and why he or she is so fond of his or her hobby. Complete the table on Task 6 on page 81 in your course book. Speaker 1.
My hobby is music. I spend a lot of time at it, and I really enjoy it, and plan to have fun with it when I am older. I play in many competitions, and often do very well. I won my first when I was 8, the very first competition I ever competed in at that. I play for weddings, too, and I also just like playing my music to make people happy, as well as myself. I know it sounds corny, but it's fun. I like to listen to all kinds of music, and any kind is okay with me, just as long as it isn't really pointless and dumb like rap and heavy metal. If you like rap and heavy metal, sorry.
Speaker 2.
I like to collect postcards, pencils, autographs, notepaper, and a few other things that I can't remember. I like collecting postcards because there are all different kinds. My pen pals, or email pals, can send me postcards. I enjoy when I go on trips to find some interesting ones. I have some from CA, which stands for California, BSB, which is Babysitter's Club, a few shiny ones, some with animals, some from Florida, Oregon, and lots more. I like collecting pencils too. Pencils can have all kinds of neat designs on them. Like I have 2 pencils from my pen pals that say, "With love from Katya Stanford." One is gold and one is silver. I have pencils from places I went to and from doing things like doing the summer reading program for a few years. I have a pencil from each year I did the program. This year I'm going to volunteer for the reading program and help other kids. I also like collecting autographs. I want to be an author when I grow up, so I always have a few from some authors. I have a few from the actors and actresses. I have some from Girl Scout camp and from my friends, and many more. I've read in my latest American Girl magazine some cool ways to sign other people. I really enjoy collecting notepaper. This is my newest collection. I have 5 different kinds. I have one that has some lily pads in the corner, sunflowers, a birdhouse and flowers, tropical fish, and white and blue flowers. And I love them all.
Speaker 3.
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I have a very special passion for classical ballet. My most favorite part of it is its self-discipline and all the graceful movements of its nature. Although I have many favorite dancers such as Christine Walsh and Tamara Rojo, there are still many more. I have studied classical ballet, and I must say it is very romantic, graceful, and a very artistic way of expressing a story such as Giselle. I mostly love its lightness and gracefulness. Anyone who loves ballet would also say it's creative, imaginative, and most of all, it's very beautiful, fragile, and delicate.
Task 2.2. Listen to the recording and say what things Steve Barnett enjoys doing. Then, play the tape again and fill in the blanks in Task 7 on page 81 in your course book.
I like to do many things. You can call them hobbies. I like playing sports, basketball, soccer and tennis, chess, reading and science. The 3 sports I play most are basketball and tennis, which I play on our synthetic grass tennis court, and soccer, which I play on the 220 metre by 200 metre sports field in front of my home. I'm still learning the skills of basketball and tennis. I'm doing okay in these sports. Don't tell me how to play soccer. My speed and fast footwork help me being a good player. My favourite soccer club is Ajax Amsterdam. And, my favourite player is... I don't really have one. My favourite basketball team are the Minnesota Timberwolves. My favourite tennis player is Richard Krajicek, and maybe Michael Chang. I also play a lot of chess. Not that I'm very interested in playing it, but I'm very good at it. Last year I played my first international school competition. I played 4 first boards and 4 second boards. I won 3 first boards and 4 second boards. My favourite chess player is... well, I like Kasparov, but Bobby Fischer was the ultimate chess legend. It's a pity he doesn't play anymore. I also like science. It's just very interesting, especially physics and chemistry. But I reckon biology, generalogy, biotechnology, etc. They're the most boring things in the world. Just give me something logical.
Task 2.3. Listen to a girl talk about her childhood and answer the questions on task 13 on page 84 in your course book.
Wasted childhood. I was sitting on the floor shuffling cards. What game do you guys want to play? I asked mindlessly. Rummy, somebody said. Rummy? That's a good game, I thought. We finished the game. I won. Once again, I found myself shuffling the cards. Old maid, someone answered my unasked question. Wait a minute, I thought. I don't know how to play old maid. I said as much to my friends. What? They practically hollered. Don't know how to play old man's pack? I patiently explained that while I had heard of these games, I had no idea how to play. My friend said she had played these throughout her childhood. They were like second nature. What did you do in your childhood? She asked, truly curious. What had I done during my childhood? I tried to reconstruct a typical day. I could picture myself getting up, going upstairs and practicing my cello for half an hour. I remember the time for certain, how it dragged on. Then I ate breakfast with my family. We all piled into the car and Dad went to work, my sister, brother and I to school. Then my mum went back to the house to do whatever mums do. I remember school for what it was worth. Teachers, recess, fun. I remember coming home, crossing the street at the crosswalk, meeting my mum. I know when we got home we watched 2 half-hour cartoons. He-Man at 2:30 and Voltron at 3. Then at 3:30 I left for swim team practice with my sister and brother until 6:15. I really loved those practices. I loved being in the water. I really thought I had to have been a dolphin in a past life to be able to love it so much. Mind you, some days I didn't feel like going, but once I was there, oh, what bliss. I always had plenty of friends to talk to and all types. Quiet, loud, shy or obnoxious. The YMCA swim team had all kinds. I'd get home from practice around 6:45, eat dinner, then go to bed. Wait a minute, I asked myself. When did I see my friends? Where was my free time? Saturdays, maybe? No, I had swim meets most Saturdays. Sunday? All I really remember was going to church on Sundays. I tried to remember what else I did besides swim and go to school, but I couldn't for the life of me. Sure, I could recall isolated incidents, now hazy, of visiting a friend's house, but nothing else. I wandered into my middle school memories, but the only difference was that now there was an hour or 2 of homework before going to bed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realised I spent the bulk of my childhood either at school or at swim team practices. Did I waste my childhood swimming? The horrifying thought hit me like a thunderbolt. I've thought a lot about this since that day. I've thought why I swam. I think it was because I loved it so much. I wondered why I didn't miss going to my friends' houses. But I realised that my best friends were also at practice. So, now I don't think I necessarily wasted my childhood. It's just that swimming was my childhood. I'm not really upset about it. I don't think I would change anything if I could. I learned a lot in that pool. I learned that when someone passes you, you get this funny kind of hurt deep inside. I learned that when you win, you get a wonderful feeling that lasts a long time. I learned that when you get that bad feeling, your real friends are the ones who stand by you.
Task 2.4. Listen to the recording and say, what the speaker's attitude towards fan interference is. Does the speaker sound annoyed, disturbed, or excited?
A disturbing occurrence is happening more and more frequently in the world of sport. It is fan interference. Fan interference has been responsible for the delaying of a game to affecting the outcome of a game. Fans are beginning to think they are part of the action, but they have to realise that they are not. It just ruins the game for them and for others around them. A recent example of fan interference happened after a college football game, in which a couple of people were critically injured because of it. Fans in Wisconsin trampled over a fence and into a field in celebration of a win. Some people were trapped under the fallen fence. Another example of someone being injured because of a fan happened during a tennis match. A man who disliked tennis star Monica Seles attempted to kill her by stabbing her in the back with a knife. Fan interference can also cause riots and delays of an event. During the Riddick Bowe-Evander Holyfield boxing match, a man parachuted into the open arena and landed on the spectators. Fans proceeded to beat the man, which caused a 21-minute delay in the match. Besides the delay affecting the two boxers, the man was hurt and had to be taken to a hospital. I do not know what would feel worse, people beating on him, or what might happen to him when he leaves the hospital.
Task 2.5. Listen to Deborah Orr's school story and discuss the questions in Task 21 on page 90 in your course book.
Deborah Orr's school story. The oddest thing is the details I can remember and the details I can't. I was bullied at primary school for being a snob, at first by a small group of former friends and eventually by the majority of the 40-plus class for the whole of my last 2 years at primary school. I remember a group of giggling girls besieging me in the school library and stripping me down to my pants and vest. I remember wondering how I was going to get myself out of it without alerting teachers or parents. I did somehow, but I don't remember the details. I remember the front doorbell ringing one Sunday evening and my mum answering the door. She called to me that some friends were asking me to go out and play, and I didn't want to. I knew it must be a trick because by then I didn't have any friends. She was so pleased, though, that her loner daughter did appear to have a social existence, that she insisted I go. As I reached the front door, I saw two of my main tormentors standing on the doorstep, smirking at me, while behind them in the street were maybe 25 children, 1 or 2 on roller skates, some circling lazily on bikes, others just standing about and looking. I remember slipping out, numb with dread, then answering yes when my parents asked if I'd had a good time after I'd come home. I can remember nothing else but a dark haze of misery from the hours between. I remember eventually waking up one morning and finding that my lips were swollen and I couldn't speak. During the week I was off school with that weird hysterical illness, I broke down and told my parents what was going on. They told the school, and the headmaster's response was to line up about 15 of the bullies and make me walk down the line, shaking hands with them while they said sorry. Why was it me who was being punished, I thought? This would make everything worse. It did make things better, though, because after the bullying was more sporadic and only outside the school gates. It stopped when I went to secondary school. I was still ostracized, but not actually attacked. Or maybe I was ostracized. I was so wary of other children by then that I felt it was more prudent for me to keep my distance. Not that I had much choice. I was so withdrawn by then that all conversation was traumatic for me. Today, a quarter of a century on from my own intensive course of life lessons, the National Association of Head Teachers has published guidelines for anti-bullying policies to safeguard pupils and teachers. The association's General Secretary, David Hart, announced that all allegations of bullying have to be treated seriously because bullying can irrevocably damage the mental health of individuals. Ultimately, it could put the school at risk of claim for damages.
Task 2.6. Listen to 2 poems written by teenagers and give answers to questions in Task 23 on page 91 in your course book. Not anymore.
Push yourself! Push yourself! I heard my fierce coach yell. His voice pierced me like knives slicing my back. I heard him roar, "Try! I know you can!" Young and frail like a newborn bird, filled with energy and passion for the sport. I waited for my moment, spread my wings and fly. Loving it but hating him. His words scared me, and my passion for the sport too. Walking up to him, bravely holding up my head, with all the courage I had in me, I opened my mouth like a lion and said, "No more pushing, not for me, not any more." Walking out of the gym that day, quickly running into my mum's car, I heard the night's wind say, "You could have made it, you could have done it. All you needed to do was try, and you were on your way."
Football disappointment.
Years ago, we worked so hard preparing for that one last chance, hour after hour running in the heat, trying to determine what we would be. Visions of being great danced through our minds. When we got there, expectations soaring, confidence abundant, loads of ability. Then it happened. That one first loss changed everything, dreams shattered. The perfect season, number 1 in the state, 15th in the nation, all up in smoke, confidence lost. Now I find myself left in the blank. Whatever went wrong? That early September night? Why had we given up so easily? I guess it's the result of a bunch of individuals not becoming a team.
Test 2.7. You will hear Jason's point of view on professional sports. Listen to him and make notes on the main points, using the keywords in the box on page 94. Then compare Jason's point of view with your own. On what points do you agree with Jason? On what points is your opinion different? Sometimes I wonder whether there is any loyalty left in professional sports today. Anyway, in today's 4 major sports, loyalty isn't found very easily. It seems that today the modern athlete doesn't care too much about other than himself. Sports today is all about money. Players don't care about staying with the same organization unless they're being paid big bucks and their team is winning. If either doesn't happen, the player will probably request to be traded. And if he isn't, you know when the contract is up, he's gone. Take Roger Clemens, for example. While in Boston, the management took care of him. His last contract made him the highest paid baseball player when it was signed. This year, he left the team to go to Toronto after being with the Sox for his whole career. Where is his loyalty? Another thing today's pro athlete does is put himself before the team. An example of that would be John Valentine. Valentine has been the Red Sox starting shortstop for the past few years and is more than adequate. He is a good hitter, but only a decent fielder. At the end of the year last season, Norma Garciparra was brought up. Garciparra is a tremendous fielder and a pretty good hitter. He, like Valentine, plays shortstop. The management knows Norma is the shortstop of the future. Knowing this, the organization asked Valentine to play either second or third base. Valentine was angered with the team, and because of his inability to cooperate and do what's best for the team, he will probably end up traded or see his role as a player diminish. Although almost everyone in sports is in it solely for the money or personal glory, there are a few who still have loyalty. Ray Berg, Ryan Sandberg, and Joe Dumars are players with loyalty to their franchise. All of these players have had Hall of Fame careers and have stayed with the same team their whole career. These aren't the only loyal players left, even though there are fewer players who care about their teams. Players today are getting greedier and greedier. On the whole, in my opinion, there isn't much loyalty left in pro sports. But for the sports purists, there are still a few, but there is certainly a dying breed. Task 2.8.
Golf, boring or cool? I live near St. Andrews, where the Open has been recently. My family watched the golf competition all week, and I thought the game was really boring until I saw Tiger Woods playing golf. Not only is he a brilliant player, but he's really cool as well. I think he has transformed golf's boring image and inspired many young people to try golf out. Now both my sisters and I have started to play golf, and I really like it. I think Tiger Woods is great, and I wish him luck in the future.
Task 2.9. Listen to one of Kafelnikov's fans and explain what makes her admire her favorite tennis player. Do you approve of her behavior as a fan? Explain why.
I like to follow tennis all the year round and have always been more interested in personalities than nationalities. From early 1994, I have been hitching my racket to the quiet, unassuming, and incredibly cute young Russian Yevgeny Kafelnikov, whose wins over Tim Henman, a British tennis player, were fantastic, but to do it on British soil with me there to watch, I could settle for nothing less than a Kafelnikov victory in 1998. But could he do it? Sometimes criticized for not being as strong mentally as he should be, and knowing he would have to fight a fiercely patriotic crowd, Yevgeny was going to have it tough. We would both have to give it everything we had. I went appropriately dressed in my t-shirt, which was especially commissioned by my husband, Kafelnikov pictures front and back, and a message that read, "Yevgeny, Yevgeny, get your balls and racket out. Show me what it's all about." "Look," I said as I left home, "this is an opportunity of a lifetime just to see him. I'd rather see him lose to Henman than never see him at all." My husband knew I was lying. I arrived at the tournament with a friend. "If I hadn't been prepared to be totally embarrassed, I would have never agreed to come with you," she said at 9:45. They were due on court at 12:30. The seconds dragged. Anxiety levels rose. This was crunch time. At 12:15, we took our seats immediately behind one of the players' chairs. I took my jumper off. You could hear the sounds of the shock around the court as the crowd saw the pictures and read the message on my t-shirt. It was then that I really understood how tough it would be. At 12:30, the players were introduced onto the court. Tim received a huge round of applause. Then Yevgeny, even more gorgeous in real life. I stood up and cheered for him. From then on, it was me against the crowd. My husband was confident that I could shout as loudly as 5,000 people. But Yevgeny wasn't aware of it. I would have to let him know. Play was announced. The crowd clapped. Kafelnikov walked past. "Come on, Yevgeny," I yelled, the volume of which even startled me. He turned, looked in my direction, surprised perhaps by the strength of support for him in the British crowd. The scene was set. I kept it up through the match. And what a match it was! Tim startled well. He looked focused, determined, and aggressive. The crowd roared at every point he won. Yevgeny looked as if it was a bit early in the day to be out of bed, let alone playing competitive tennis. His body language said it all. The crowd offered little in the way of support. It was at 3-3 in the first set that Henman broke to go 4-3 up. Despite my loud support, he failed to wake up and lost the first set 4-6. The crowd went wild. Henman continued to maintain the pressure in the second set, and at 4-4 got a break point against Kafelnikov's serve. It was at that point that I knew I could not witness a Kafelnikov defeat. My lone support grew louder and louder. Kafelnikov suddenly woke up and after some further tussle won the game, went on to break Henman's serve and took the second set 6-4. The third set was a joy. I shouted and cheered fairly confident now that revenge would be met. Kafelnikov took it 6-2. While I will never support Henman against any player, as that Wimbledon wound will always be sore, the score had finally been settled on British soil. In Kafelnikov's post-match interview on court, he said it had been a big win. He had known he would have to take on the crowd, and he had been surprised and pleased to find some loud supporter for him. It had helped him win the match. I was ecstatic, he had noticed. I got his autograph. "I'm your biggest fan, Yevgeny," I said. "Yes, please, thank you," he said, trying to read the message on my t-shirt. Very occasionally, there are days in your life that are so exquisitely perfect that you wish you could box them up and relive them from time to time. This was just such one of those days.
Task 2.10.
One of the oldest forms of athletic competition. This sport is undeniably the most ancient form of athletic competition. The mythological invention of the sport is found in such legends as that of Hercules, who contributed to the creation of the world. The sport is so ancient that it is impossible to clarify its exact time and place of origin. Because of the strong connection between ancient Greek mythology and this sport, it is no great surprise that this sport was of utmost importance. Children were educated at an early age in the techniques and philosophies of running, a sport which was established as a permanent feature in children's education. At one point, runners wore a loincloth about their waist. This was later abandoned, and runners competed completely naked. The one exception was the race in armor, in which runners carried a shield, a helmet, and shin plates. Another piece of important equipment was the Husplex, a device which was constructed to ensure that all runners started at the same time. All runners were to start at the same time, under a specific command. Early starters were beaten and disqualified. There was a code of honor to which all competitors were held. This code consisted of several basic principles of competition. These principles were not hindering other opponents by pushing, knocking, or holding them, and above all others, refraining from bribery or magic spells. Since running was the most practical and common form of exercise and sport in ancient Greece, there was never a lack of talented athletes in this area. Athletes of this period were said to have amazing endurance and considerable speed. The status of successful runners varied. Most important was the possession of great strength, speed, and endurance. Up till now, running exhibits the largest number of consecutive Olympic winners and multiple event winners.
Test 2.11.
Hello, my name is Xenophon. I come from Corinth, one of the oldest Greek cities. I belong to the family Oligathidae, which is known for its outstanding athletes. My grandfather, Pataderas, and father, Thessalus, were both famous athletes. When I was growing up, I saw my relatives achieve great fame as Olympic champions, and being influenced by my father, I decided I wanted to enjoy this prestige also. I committed myself to harsh training to build my physical and mental strength. My family was able to train me as professional since we had already established our name in the honorable group of Olympic victors. I would practice outside our house in the pasture. I practiced running, jumping, javelin, discus, and wrestling. I showed excellence in all of these areas, particularly running. My trainers supplemented my practice with lessons on the rules of participating in all of these contests and the qualities I needed to win at the Olympics. My first year of competition was 464 BC. A messenger from Olympia came down to my town and announced that the games would start in 2 months. I decided to compete in 2 different events. First, I would run the stade, which is the shortest race, a 200-yard sprint. Then I would compete in the pentathlon. This was to be the ultimate test of my athletic talent, since this competition tests all-around strength instead of just one particular event. Before departing on my journey to Olympia, I climbed the Acra Corinth and visited the temple of Aphrodite. This is a very hard climb, but I risked my life to pray to the goddess for her help. I vowed that if the goddess let me win my competitions, I would give her 100 slave girls to attend to her temple. My trainer, Vasilius, and I made plans to take a boat to Olympia. We left early enough to leave us about a month of training time in Olympia before the actual competition. When we departed, the townspeople were very excited about us and the other young men who were going to compete. We all wanted to win for Corinth and bring our city glory. As the boat sailed away, I waved to my family and promised that I would return to them a champion. The next couple of days were spent on the boat. I was nervous, but very excited. I met some other competitors. One of them, Varius, was from Aegina, and he was going to compete in wrestling. At the time of the announcement of the games, he was in Corinth, so he and I were journeying the same way. He said he was nervous about the competition too. He looked very strong. Varius and I talked a lot and enjoyed the scenery from our boat. He told me that he had tried to compete in the games at Olympia 4 years ago, and they told him he could not because he was too young. Since he could not participate, he spent the last 4 years preparing for these games. We were both getting anxious because we were almost there. I could tell he was ready to win. I told him I was going to compete in the pentathlon that had wrestling as one of its events. He gave me some suggestions to beat my opponents and told me to be confident and that victory would follow. We finally made it to Olympia. It was a beautiful place, and I was so excited to be there for the games. Once I arrived in Olympia, Farius and I went to our separate ways to do training. I realized I needed to find a sleeping place. I did what most of the competitors did. I shared a tent with my trainer. Before we could compete, the runners were responsible for cleaning the track. We had to tear out weeds and grass that had grown on the track and fill in the track with sand. I arrived early enough that after the preparation was done, I had a month to practice with my trainer and continue my worship to Aphrodite, as well as the other gods and goddesses. The day before the competition arrived soon. All the athletes were nervous, but excited. The actual competition lasted 2 days. My first event, the stade, was the first event to be held, early the next morning. On the day of the competition, I woke early, having had a great dream. I dreamt that my feet were on fire, which is a good sign for runners, meaning that I would run like a cat on hot bricks. To prepare, I stretched and said my final prayers to the gods. I removed my toga and rubbed oil all over my body. a ritual for competitors. After arriving at the stadium and gazing at all of the cheering spectators, I was set up at the starting line, which was at the far end of the stadium, with the other 20 competitors. Assuming starting position, we were all tense, aware that anyone who started early was punished with a flogging. 3, 2, 1, we were off. I ran as hard as so many times before, practicing on my track in Corinth. Digging my feet into the sand, I scattered it everywhere as I struggled to gain the lead. There were 50 meters left, and I had only one runner slightly in front of me. The crowd cheered, and I was given my trophy, which I placed on my head. I graciously received the applause of the audience. I was a champion, but I still had the desire to prove my all-around strength in the pentathlon the next day. Again, I woke early in order to stretch. I easily run the running and jumping events. Next were discus and javelin. I had not practiced as much in these events, yet I managed to place first in the javelin and second in the discus. The final event was wrestling. This order was the most practical since the wrestling event was the most rough, and after their matches, wrestlers were quite beaten up. I looked around at my competitors, and some of them were much larger than me, but I would not let that stop me. I used my quickness to defeat my larger opponents and showed the confidence that Farish told me to show. His suggestions helped me, and I won the wrestling event. Having won all but one of the competitions, I was the victor of the pentathlon. I was overjoyed as I received my second trophy. I had come to Olympia mainly to win the state and ended up winning the pentathlon as well. I was respected because it was almost unheard of for an athlete to win in 2 events. That night, after all the spectators had left, the celebration started. All of the victors were honored in a large feast. I sat back and relaxed. I enjoyed tasty foods, wine, and music until the early morning. The next day, my trainer and I packed up to sail directly back to Corinth. Leaving beautiful Olympia was hard, but I was excited to return home. We retraced our boat journey. The news had arrived that I was a champion, and when I arrived, the townspeople had a large parade for me. I was enjoying all of the festivities, but I remembered my vow to Aphrodite. She had helped me overcome my worthy opponents, so I had to give her the 100 slave girls I had promised. I had no trouble finding girls willing to serve Aphrodite in my name, and I met my promise. The next day, I led them up to the temple and offered them to Aphrodite, and thanked her for her goodwill. This was the only Olympic competition that I participated in. I retired after this with all the prize money and fame I had earned as a double event champion. Even though my competing days were over, I had raised my children to be athletes so that the tradition continued in our family. So the sun set on another Olympic career.
Task 2.12.
In the upper hoist of the flag is the state and civil flag of the United Kingdom, popularly called the Union Jack. On the main body of the flag there are 5 white stars, representing the Southern Cross, a constellation of stars generally only visible in the southern hemisphere. Each of these stars has 7 points, except for the smallest star, which has only 5. Directly below the Union Jack is a large 7-pointed white star called the Federation Star, representing the Federation of the Colonies of Australia on the 1st of January 1901. There is 1 point for each of the 6 original states, and 1 to represent all of Australia's internal and external territories.
Task 2.13.
Inside the torch. The torch for the Sydney Olympic Games was designed with Sydney in mind. The points at the top of the 3-layer torch represent the sail-like roofs of the Sydney Opera House. Its slight curve resembles that of the ancient Aboriginal boomerang. The torch is made up of 3 layers, with a small fuel canister inside. It weighs about 2 pounds. The inside layer is made of stainless steel. The middle blue layer and the outside layer are made of aluminium. The fuel is a mixture of propane and butane, and is designed to burn up to 20 minutes with a minimum of emissions. The flame has been tested to remain lit in a rainstorm or in winds of up to 40 miles per hour.
Unit 3. The Young Scientists and Inventors Club. Task 3.1. You will hear some school students share their impressions of the summertime in a math camp. Did they like the different things or the same things? Make notes and fill in the table in Task 10 on page 146 in your course book. Speaker 1.
5 weeks of the most awesome mathematics guided by the most brilliant mathematicians. That's what math camp is all about. Whether it was friends, teachers, or some combination of the two, the things they taught me and the enthusiasm they exhibited gave me a renewed sense of interest and passion for mathematics. I learned so much in 5 weeks. From Fourier analysis to projective geometry, math camp has it all.
Speaker 2.
Math camp was definitely the most fun I've ever had, not just because of all the things I learned, but because of all the new people I met. No other place can have that much talent, ability, and knowledge crammed into such a funny, relaxing, enjoyable, yet retrospectively short period of time. I would recommend applying early in high school and going back multiple times. There's nothing quite like it, and once you've experienced it, you're hooked.
Speaker 3.
The environment at a place like math camp is paradise for anyone who has ever enjoyed solving intriguing and difficult math problems. It is especially beneficial to students seeking to qualify for such math contests as the USAMO and IMO. The professors here are experts in teaching advanced high school students essential concepts for just about any field in mathematics.
Speaker 4.
During the 5 weeks of math camp, I made more friends than in the 2 years since I came to the US from Russia. I learned more in those 5 weeks than in all my classes last year. And I didn't just learn maths. I learned about teamwork, about friendship, about many things. I met people who are as interested in maths as I am, and who know much more maths than I do. I got to call PhDs by their first names. I got to interrupt teachers in class and be appreciated for it. I got to argue with famous professors, and they didn't assume they were right. Vin, one of the faculty, still tries to teach me to solve the Rubik's Cube, all the way from England. Camp gave me the kind of freedom I had never felt before. I will never forget the experience, and I'll do everything possible and impossible to come back next year.
Speaker 5.
Math camp has provided me with tidbits of information that keep showing up in the strangest places. I'm in college now, doing a double major in mathematics and electrical engineering. The funny thing is how I usually have experience with the mathematics involved, even though you wouldn't realize it by looking at the courses I've taken. For instance, the big thing that we do in electrical engineering right now is using phasors. Well, I inadvertently got my first taste of that from a problem I did at Math Camp 98. I never even knew about the binomial theorem, or modular arithmetic, or the pigeonhole principle, or what constitutes a solid mathematical argument for very many sorts of things, until I went to math camp. Usually I ace the test that the EE students fail, especially when the questions include the words show that or prove, which aren't as common as one might expect in an engineering course.
Speaker 6.
Doing a project is an excellent way to get a glimpse into the way more advanced mathematics works. You don't just work on a problem for 5 minutes and then finish it, but instead for weeks, months, or even years. The projects give campers a chance to get a feel for working for extended periods of time on one problem. Math camp was the best 5 weeks of my life. It wasn't just the math, which was incredible. It wasn't just the campers and the teachers, who were awesome. It wasn't just my project, which was cool. It was the whole experience together, along with late-night bridge and hikes and field trips, that made math camp great.
Task 3.2. Listen to the recording and fill in the gaps in the text about the structure of the education system in Canada on page 165 in your course book.
Education system in Canada. The school year runs from the first week in September until the last week of June, and the school day usually runs from 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. Preschool. Licensed daycares and nursery schools will give children under the age of 5 basic social and reading skills. These schools are not publicly funded. At 5, children attend kindergarten, which is usually attached to a primary school. Elementary. The elementary school system includes grades 1 to 6 or 8, depending on the district. Students are instructed in a number of subjects and are tested regularly. A school student can be made to repeat an entire year if his or her performance is below standard. Gifted students, pupils, or school students may be allowed to skip a year. In some areas, students go to a different school for grades 7 and 8. These schools, called senior public schools or junior high, help ease the transition from elementary to secondary education. Secondary. Secondary schools can be academic or vocational, or both. In addition to religious schools, there are also high schools specializing in the arts or other subjects, disciplines. Some form of streaming exists in most systems. Students can pursue courses geared to prepare them for a vocation, community, college, or university. It is very important to choose the correct level when beginning secondary school, as it can be difficult to upgrade later. Secondary school, there is a core curriculum and compulsory subjects, and students need a certain number of courses to graduate. Most students take between 4 or 5 years to finish secondary school.
Test 3.3. Listen to the 1995 Peace Declaration and write down its 4 main issues. Summarize what has been said in it in 4 or 5 sentences.
The 1995 Peace Declaration. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now half a century to the day since Hiroshima was devastated by the atomic bomb. Along with recalling that fateful day and praying for the souls of the many who died, and being acutely aware of the difficulties the aging Hibakusha face, I cannot but repeat in the strongest possible terms that the development and possession of nuclear weapons constitute a crime against humanity. Throughout this half-century, we have told all the world of the human devastation that the atomic bombs brought, particularly the unprecedented damage of radiation. In a consistent appeal to the world nations, we insisted that nuclear weapons be abolished. Yet distrust among nations is deep-rooted, and there are vast stockpiles of nuclear weapons around the globe, creating a formidable barrier to the attainment of our ideal. It is profoundly saddening that some people see the possession of nuclear weapons as symbolic of a nation's strength. Nuclear weapons are clearly inhumane weapons in obvious violation of international law. So long as such weapons exist, it is inevitable that the horror of Hiroshima and Nagasaki will be repeated somewhere, sometime, in an unforgivable affront to humanity itself. If humanity is to maintain hope for the future, we must act now with courage and decisiveness to achieve a nuclear-free world. As a first step, we call for an immediate and comprehensive nuclear test ban and the establishment of a new nuclear-free zone in the Asia-Pacific. In keeping with the Constitution's pacifist ideals and proclaiming its 3 non-nuclear principles of non-possession, non-manufacture, and non-introduction, the government of Japan should take the lead in working for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Likewise, we also call upon the government to be more supportive of all hibakusha, these witnesses to the nuclear era, in Japan and elsewhere. The possession of nuclear weapons is no guarantee of national security. Rather, the proliferation of nuclear weapons, the transfer of nuclear weapons technology, and the leakage of nuclear materials are all threats to the survival of the human race. Like the suppression of human rights, impoverishment and starvation, regional conflict, and the destruction of the global environment, these are all major threats to world peace. This is an era in which we must think of global security. It is a time to foster human solidarity transcending national borders, to pool our wisdom, and to work together to establish world peace. At this 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, it is important to look at the stark reality of war in terms of both aggrieved and aggriever, so as to develop a common understanding of history. The suffering of all the war's victims indelibly etched in our hearts. We want to apologize for the unbearable suffering that Japanese colonial domination and war inflicted on so many people. Memory is where past and future meet. Respectfully learning the lessons of the past, we want to impress the misery of war and the atomic bombing on the generations of younger people who will be tomorrow's leaders. Similarly, we also need to emphasize the human aspects of education as the basis for peace. Only when life and human rights are accorded the highest priority can young people enjoy lives of boundless hope. At this peace memorial ceremony commemorating the 50th anniversary of the atomic bombing, I am resolved to spare no effort in achieving the abolition of nuclear weapons and the attainment of world peace.
Task 3.4. The atomic bomb that had exploded in the sky over Nagasaki at 11:02 a.m., August 9, 1945, generated a ferocious flash of heat, blast of wind, and deadly radiation, and instantly reduced the city to a wasteland. A total of 74,000 people died, and 75,000 were injured in this catastrophe reminiscent of the end of the world. What do our contemporaries from Japan think about nuclear weapons? What is their message to the world? Should nuclear weapons be used for matters of national security? Listen to some extracts from interviews with kids and adults. Take notes of their points of view and complete the table in Task 9 on page 194 in your course book. Speaker 1.
5 decades have passed since the atomic bombing, but to me the horror of that August day is as frightful as ever. Nuclear weapons present a colossal threat to mankind. The reasons for which the A-bomb was dropped were mostly of ambitious military and political character. It severely hurt people mentally as well as physically. Unfortunately, there remains a wide gap between American and Japanese perceptions of the atomic bombings. And though the question of the abolition of nuclear weapons was raised at the UN conferences on disarmament issues several times, there is still a high wall standing between the aspiration of the citizens of Nagasaki and the insistence of the nuclear states on the concept of nuclear deterrence or security through the possession of nuclear weapons.
Speaker 2.
Here in Japan, survivors of the atomic bombing are advancing into old age, and their experiences are fading into the mist of memory. Has the message of Nagasaki reached the ears of the young generation? This is not an easy question. As you might probably know, about 70% of the current Nagasaki city population was born after World War II. The problem of how to impress younger generations with the misery of war, the horror of the atomic bombings, and the importance of peace is a matter of pressing concern. As the only country in the world to experience atomic bombings, Japan must clearly declare in the International Court of Justice that the use of nuclear weapons is a breach of international law. It must also enact the threefold non-nuclear principle as law and strive for the establishment of a nuclear-free zone in the Asia-Pacific region.
Speaker 3.
I want to live in a secure environment. I want my generation to have the trust in the governments that declare to protect the Earth's environment and to ensure the survival of the human race. It is imperative that the United Nations make efforts to ban the manufacture of weapons-related nuclear materials, to abolish biological and chemical weapons, and to achieve reductions in conventional weapons. Yet we can observe the violations of the decisions taken. For instance, soon after the nuclear states agreed at the past May conference to suspend the nuclear tests and to try to end negotiations on a nuclear test ban treaty by next spring, the People's Republic of China conducted a test. France announced its decision to resume tests, and the United States revealed that it was considering a similar decision. It is clear that the nuclear states are striving to perfect the technology of nuclear testing through simulation, and that there has been no decline in their commitment to the development of nuclear weapons. The young citizens of Nagasaki demand that the nuclear states immediately conclude a nuclear test ban treaty and begin concrete negotiations on the establishment of a time schedule for the abolition of nuclear weapons.
Speaker 4.
Japan has seen a period of peace continue during the post-war decades and tremendous economic development result from the tireless efforts of its citizens. In many other countries, however, children are leading anything but a peaceful life, unable to receive adequate nourishment or education due to wars and local conflicts, and not even certain whether or not they will be alive tomorrow. The post-war generation, of which I am a member, has no experience of war or the atomic bombings. We must listen to the words of the atomic bomb survivors, study about the historical events leading to World War II, the horror of war and the reality of the atomic bombings, and recognize the fact that human race cannot coexist with nuclear weapons.
Speaker 5.
The atomic bomb survivors greet this 50th anniversary after overcoming the grief of losing family and friends and the long struggle with the anguish of late atomic bomb effects. They cannot wait another 50 years. Their highest hope is to see the abolition of nuclear weapons within their own lifetime. It is a steep climb to this goal, but one from which we must never relent. Let us take the first step on a new journey. While transmitting information to the world about the atomic bombing and the aspiration for peace through media such as photographs, film, and computer networks, Nagasaki will make efforts to host the Nuclear Disarmament Seminar advocated by the Japanese government and to serve once again as a venue for the UN Conference on Disarmament Issues.
Unit 4. The Echo Club. Task 4.1. Listen to the poems written by two kids and an adult and say what feelings about the modern world are expressed in them. Who are the poems addressed to? An extract from Earth Song by Michael Jackson.
What about sunrise? What about rain? What about the things that you said we were to gain? What about killing fields? Is there a time? What about all the things that you said was yours and mine? Did you ever stop to notice all the blood we've shed before? Did you ever stop to notice the crying earth, the weeping shores? Hey, what about yesterday? What about us? What about the seas? What about us? The heavens are falling down. What about us? I can't even breathe. What about us? What about the bleeding earth? What about us? Can't we feel its wounds? What about us? What about nature's worth? Ooh, ooh. It's our planet womb. What about us? What about animals? What about us? We've turned kingdoms to dust. What about us? What about elephants? What about us? Have we lost their trust? What about us? What about crying whales? What about us? We're ravaging the seas. What about us? What about forest trails? Ooh, ooh. Burnt despite our pleas. What about us? What about the Holy Land? What about us? Torn apart by creed? What about us? What about the common man? What about us? Can't we set him free? What about us? What about the children dying? What about us? Can't you hear them cry? What about us? Where did we go wrong? Ooh, ooh. Someone tell me why. What about us?
A Future Sky by Warren Lissek.
Fallout and death fill the streets of a titanic hell. Murder, burglary, and vandalism wrap in the world in a black bag. suffocating the struggling life and forcing all to fight a hopeless battle. The black water, polluted and dirty with blood and bodies, flows through the cities of hell, putting others in to drown in its tar. The sun, now a dwarf in a universe of giants, trying to shed the light that it has lost unto the earth, the black, dead earth, with black trees and a blacker sky, disease and sickness immune to what was the human race, able to infect and infest all.
My Mississippi by Brian Saros.
Once I flowed so strong and proud, with endless strength I would crest and wave around. My strength would grow and cover the ground, but now man has learned to tame, and my great strength is not the same. Along with waste and pollution, the fish and game who used to play have all but gone away. As for my future, I cannot see what will come to me.
Task 4.2. Is dropping litter a crime? How much could a person get charged for dropping litter in Britain? Whose job is it to clean up litter? Listen to the recording and answer these and some other questions in Task 10 on page 206 in your course book.
Is dropping litter a crime?
Littering is a criminal offense. You can be fined, though not jailed. Cases are tried in magistrates' courts.
What is litter?
Well, there's no precise definition of litter. It can mean a small item, for example a crisp packet, or a large item, for example a bag of rubbish, or items scattered around. The most common items are cigarette ends, sweet wrappers, and matchsticks. In a Tidy Britain group survey, dog's mess, drinks cans, and fast food packaging were named as the litter that people most disliked seeing.
How much could a person get charged for dropping litter?
The average fine weighs in at around £100, plus court costs, but littering could cost you up to £2,500. If you actually get caught in the act, you could face a £25 on-the-spot fine. Local authorities can appoint officers to issue a £25 fixed penalty fine for littering. About a third of our local authorities do this. If it is not paid within 14 days, the offender can be taken to court. Drivers who throw litter from vehicles can be prosecuted. Vehicle registration details are taken, and the authorities can trace the owner through a special system. The £25 fixed penalty fine can be used. Businesses that dump rubbish on pavements can be fined for littering. So can householders. Fly tipping, being potentially more serious and hazardous than littering, is an offense under the waste legislation. On conviction, the fine is up to £20,000 or 6 months imprisonment or both.
But no one ever gets fined for dropping litter, do they?
Yes, they do. There are about 500 police prosecutions for littering in 1997. Most prosecutions are by the police, through the Crown Prosecution Service, but local authorities can also prosecute. Far more men than women are prosecuted.
What should I do if I see someone dropping litter?
We advise you, don't tackle them unless you feel safe doing so. You can report incident to the authorities, but it is worth pointing out that prosecutions are costly. So if you do go running to the nearest policeman screaming, "Litter!" don't expect the perpetrator to automatically end up behind bars. If you really want to help make a difference, don't drop litter yourself, and encourage everyone you know to do the same.
Whose job is it to clean up litter?
If it is on public land, on the streets, in the park, on the beach, etc., your local authority, cleansing services, have to pick up the tab. But their resources are stretched, so give them a hand and don't drop litter. Guidance to councils on carrying out this cleansing duty is in the government's Code of Practice on Litter and Refuse. About £323 million a year is spent by local authorities in England on street cleaning and litter clearance.
Task 4.3. Tidy Britain Group is a voluntary organization which has developed a special litter code for the public in Britain. Listen to the recording and say which recommendations one should follow no matter what country he or she lives in.
Everyone can follow the litter code. Put your litter in a bin. If there's no bin, take your litter home. Don't throw litter from a vehicle. Use a car litter bag or wait until you find a bin. Never empty car ashtrays onto the ground. Cigarette ends, matchsticks and chewing gum are small, but they're litter too. So is discarded food. The bin's the place for them. Protect our countryside and remote places from litter pollution. Materials like plastic, tin, aluminium take decades to decay. Make sure household or business refuse is securely contained in a bin or bag so that it doesn't escape and become litter. Everyone is responsible for their own waste. Never dump it. Extra household rubbish can be taken to the council tip free of charge. Ask the council to collect large items such as mattresses, furniture or bagged up DIY waste. There's usually a charge. If litter has built up and become an eyesore, report it to the council cleansing service. Keep your own garden or land litter free. It's okay to pick up someone else's litter and put it in a bin.
Task 4.4. Listen to Roland White's description of his past experience of biking to work and find answers to the questions on Task 13 on page 208 of your course book. I used to bike to work. I thought I was being really sneaky by getting most of my work out in and avoiding sitting in rush hour traffic at the same time. I mean, it really added another 20 or 30 minutes to my daily commute. 30 minutes each way in a car or 45 each way cycling. Which to choose? For any kind of an athlete, the decision was a breeze. I shall bike, I said with cocky enthusiasm. I biked religiously for 3 months, day after day. Well, okay, so I was fair weather commuter. I wasn't a huge fan of the downpours and getting doused by each and every passing auto, but I was fairly consistent. At a minimum of 3 or 4 days a week, I was on the bike, getting healthy, I thought. Then I started to get sick more than I used to. A scratchy throat one day, a little cough the next, a couple of days, a dry mouth and itchy eyes. I started to look more critically at the exhaust fumes, the cars around me at every stoplight. I started to feel my lungs filled with that same exhaust. I got paranoid. Was all this exhaust making me less healthy than if I exercised at the gym? I wondered. I had to find some real evidence for my paranoia. I started to research the literature, and as a result, I discovered amazing facts on the influence of air pollution on health. I wish I'd known it before. Task 4.5. Nowadays, many people support the idea of creating eco-houses, eco-villages, eco-towns. What kind of places might they be? Listen to a story about Recycle City and write the green code which people in this city follow. Which points of this code do you follow, or are you going to follow?
Just a few years ago, this place was called Dump Town. For years, the folks living here hadn't thought much about where waste went, when they threw it out, and eventually that became a very big problem. Because dump towners didn't know what happened to waste after it was thrown away, they thought nothing of dropping empty soda cans here and there or putting cans of leftover paint right in their trash cans. Things that easily could have been reused or recycled were tossed in the trash because nobody believed recycling made a difference. At the dump, they threw away dangerous chemicals and poisons, which are hazardous waste, into the regular garbage, which is solid waste. The garbage heap grew and began to smell. Sometimes it caught fire, sending toxic smoke into the air and making it hard for everyone to breathe. Dump towners tried moving away from the mess, but wherever they moved, the problem was still there, on the ground and in the air. They knew they had to fix it. They learned to reduce the amount of waste they threw away. For example, they bought items at the store that weren't wrapped in extra packaging, so there would be less to throw away. They learned to reuse other things, like washing out empty jars, instead of throwing them away. And they learned to recycle. They set up bins around town to collect glass, paper and aluminium that could be converted back into raw materials, then made into new products. Dump towners paid special attention to hazardous waste and set up special collection points where people could drop off used chemicals, paints and cleansers for safe handling and proper disposal. Instead of buying environmentally harmful cleaning products, chemicals and pesticides, many dump towners switched to natural, safe substitutes. Finally, they closed the old city dump and built a new, solid waste landfill outside of town. With the town's new image, it needed a new name, and Recycle City was born. The City Council has adopted some essential guidelines to reduce waste and to keep the environment tidy. Here are some of them. To reduce waste, make less garbage. Buy only what you need. Rent, borrow or share items that aren't used much. Sell or donate goods instead of throwing them out. Buy non-toxic or the least toxic products available. Buy products that use little or no packaging. Buy individually wrapped packages only when there is no alternative. Buy reusable products, such as rechargeable batteries that don't have to be recycled after one use. Buy products made from recycled materials. Use all of the product containing toxic ingredients so there is no hazardous waste left. Take used motor oil, brake and transmission fluids, and antifreeze to the local gas station for recycling. Take old tyres to the gas station or to the local auto wrecker. Recycle City's office workers use computers to reduce the amount of paper they use. Office workers send mail to each other electronically. Email requires no paper at all. At Recycle City Hall, they have print on both sides of the paper. Then when paper can't be used again, workers put it into a recycling bin for collection. When the Recycle City government buys office supplies, it purchases recycled paper and other products that use less packaging or have been recycled. When it's time to buy computers and lighting supplies, the city purchases energy-saving models with Energy Star or green lights labels on them.
Task 4.6. On the tape you'll hear Paul West talking about the growing concern in people about what they eat and the effect food consumption on the environment. Listen to the recording and fulfill the task in exercise 22 on page 215 in your course book.
In my opinion, people nowadays are becoming more aware of what they eat. And this is not simply the matter of more and more people becoming vegetarians for health reasons. This is the matter of growing concern in people about pollution of their body. On the whole, people tend to be more cautious about the food which might be linked with causing cancer, blood disorders, or damage to the immune system. But how many of us are aware of the fact that harmful elements contained in food are the result of insecticide used on crops? How much do we know about the percentage of toxic elements leaking into food from its packaging? Much research is still necessary. A recent study of supermarket fruit and vegetables in the UK found 29 samples containing unacceptably large residues of pesticides. Alarmingly, excessive residue levels of lindane, a highly toxic pesticide, were found in such products as lettuce and chocolate. Fatty foods such as meat and eggs contain residues of another man-made toxic chemical, HCB pesticide. Government advice is that most pesticides are not harmful because they are consumed in such low quantities. But this doesn't sound as a very convincing argument. No levels of harmful elements are safe, as many of them, in the long run, are prone to causing cancer.
Task 4.7. Listen to John Wiseman speaking about the essentials of survival and complete the passage in Task 5 on page 236 in your course book.
Well, survival is the art of staying alive through adverse circumstances. These circumstances could be a lot of things, from a devastating flood or earthquake to a nuclear attack or civil war. Survivalism, as I see it, is made up of three basic elements: survival mindset, material preparation, and survival skill assessment and acquisition. You, as an individual, need to determine what your risk situations are and how to prepare for them. If you believe you'll need camping skills to make it through a time of crisis, go camping for a few days and see how you make it out. If necessary, arrange a training course in getting across unknown territory back to civilization, navigating without a map and a compass. Learn how to render first aid to sick or wounded. Maintaining a healthy physical condition is essential, but survivalism is a mindset that must become a part of your life. Always remember to keep reading, keep learning, and keep stocking up. Prepare for the worst, pray for the best.
Task 4.8. Listen to some advice on how to behave if you happen to be in the country when the flooding starts and answer the questions on Task 7 on page 237 in your course book.
Advice on how to behave in the country when the flooding starts. During a flood, it's easy to get trapped inside a building. If you happen to be in a building when the water begins to rise, stay where you are. You'll be less at risk than trying to evacuate on foot. Turn off gas and electricity and prepare emergency food supplies, warm clothing and drinking water in well-sealed containers. Collect a whistle, torch and brightly coloured cloths for signalling and add them to your gear with candles and matches. Move to an upper floor or onto the roof in a single-storey building. If you are forced to occupy the roof, erect a shelter. If it is a sloping roof, tie everyone to a chimney stack or other solid structure. If the water continues to rise, prepare some kind of raft. If you have no ropes, use bed sheets. Unless the water rises so high you are forced to evacuate, stay until it stops rising. Extra precautions should be taken in the period after the flood. When flood waters recede, they leave a scene of devastation, littered with debris and the bodies of flood victims. With decay and the pollution of the water comes the risk of disease. Take extra precautions. Burn all animal corpses and thoroughly boil all water before using.
Task 4.9. Listen to an extract from the lecture on ecological crisis in Russia. Take notes and fill in the table in Task 3 on page 241.
Let me start by saying that dangerous environmental conditions came to the attention of the public in the Soviet Union under the Glasnost policy established by Mikhail S. Gorbachev, which liberated the exchange of information in the late 1980s. The three situations that gripped public attention were the April 1986 nuclear explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Ukraine, the long-term and ongoing desiccation of the Aral Sea between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and the desertification of northern Kazakhstan by the Semipalatinsk nuclear testing site. By the time the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, such conditions had become symbols of that system's disregard for the quality of the environment. If we roughly depict the ecological situation in Russia now, we will see that an unfavorable and, in some regions, even a very acute ecological situation has developed at the present time in Russia and the territories of countries of the CIS. 15% of Russian Federation territory, where the major part of population and the industrial enterprises are located, may be considered to be as unsatisfactory from an ecological point of view. Here we have high-level pollution of air, water, and soil. Many regions appear to be zones of elevated danger and great ecological risk, where the probability that an acute ecological situation will develop is very high. I'd like to mention here that in degree of acuteness, 6 categories of ecological situations are designated: catastrophic, crisis, critical, tense, conflictual, and conditionally favorable. Let us have a closer look at the territories which are most affected by the ecological crisis. In mapping, 39 regions of the greatest ecological unfavorability stand out, of which approximately 20 are in a crisis or catastrophic situation: the zone of the Chernobyl accident, the Aral Sea and its surroundings, Kolsky Island, the Dnipropetrovsk-Krivorovsky industrial region, the Donbas, Moldova, the offshore and seaside zones of the Black and Azov Seas, the Moscow region, Kalmykia, northern Prikaspy, central Povolzhye, Ural industrial zone, the oil and gas extraction regions of northwestern Siberia, the Norilsk industrial zone, Kuzbas, Priangarye, the Fergana Valley, the Ust-Kamenogorsky industrial region, Balkhash, and Baikal. As you have probably noticed, the areas of the most acute ecological situations coincide with the most settled and most fertile part of the territory, and the appearance of acute ecological situations is characterized by a certain regularity in their coincidence with natural zones. This is undoubtedly a very alarming situation, isn't it? Each of Russia's natural zones has suffered degradation of specific kinds. In the tundra, the greatest damage stems from extraction and transportation of mineral resources by crude techniques. In delicate tundra habitats, oil spills, leaks in natural gas pipelines, and the flaring of natural gas destroy northern marshland ecosystems, which take many years to purify naturally. Also endangered are reindeer grazing lands, upon which indigenous peoples traditionally have depended for their livelihood. In the permafrost zones that constitute about 40% of Russia's territory, lower air, water, and ground temperatures slow natural self-cleansing processes that mitigate contamination in warmer regions, magnifying the impact of every spill and leak. In the taiga, or forest zone, the overcutting of trees poses the greatest threat, particularly in northern European Russia, the Urals, and the Angara Basin in south-central Siberia. Uncontrolled mining operations constitute the second major source of damage in the taiga. In the broad-leafed forest zone, irrational land use has caused soil erosion on a huge scale. Urbanization and air and water pollution also are problems. The forest steppe and steppe regions are subjected to soil exhaustion, loss of humus, soil compacting, and erosion, creating an extremely serious ecological situation. The soil fertility of Russia's celebrated Black Earth or Chernozem region has deteriorated significantly in the post-war period. Overgrazing is the main problem in the pasturage regions of the Russian steppe and has severely affected the Republic of Kalmykia in southwestern Russia and the region east of Lake Baikal. In Russia's limited semi-arid and arid territories, poorly designed irrigation and drainage systems have caused salinization, pollution, and contamination of surface and underground water, but not to the degree that these problems exist in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan. Let me now turn to the situation with the air quality. Although reductions in industrial production caused air quality indexes to improve somewhat in the 1990s, Russia's air still rates among the most polluted in the world. In 200 cities and towns, an excessive air pollution has been marked. According to one estimate, only 15% of the urban population breathes air that is not harmful. The most polluted cities are centers of heavy industry, ferrous and non-ferrous metallurgy, petroleum refining, chemicals, and pulp production. Not surprisingly, the largest industrial cities head the list. In European Russia, these are Moscow and St. Petersburg, the Ural manufacturing centers of Yekaterinburg, Nizhny Tagil, Magnitogorsk and Ufa, and Astrakhan, Samara, and Volgograd on the lower Volga. In Asian Russia, the heaviest air pollution is in Omsk and Novokuznetsk in southwestern Siberia, Irkutsk on Lake Baikal, the Norilsk Industrial Center in northwestern Siberia, and Khabarovsk in the Far East. Levels of airborne sulfur, nitrogen, and lead remain high. Most vehicles in Russia continue to burn leaded fuel. In the early 1990s, motor vehicles contributed about one-third of total hazardous emissions in urban and industrial areas. Throughout the Soviet period and into the 1990s, trucks were the greatest vehicular polluters because privately owned vehicles were relatively scarce. As Russia adopts the culture of the privately owned vehicle, however, it is likely that transportation will increase its share of total emissions. In sum, on the territory of the former USSR, more than 300 areas with an extremely unfavorable ecological situation stand out. They occupy approximately 4 million square kilometers, or 18% of the total territory of the country. In the last 20 years, the size of areas with an extremely unfavorable ecological situation has increased by 2 million square kilometers. On the whole, the overall ecological situation remains rather grim. Let me finish on a little positive note by saying that within the last 8 years, the ecological situation improved a bit. For example, in many small rivers in the Volga and the Don reservoirs, crayfish appear, and that is a good sign, because crayfish live only in clean water. Air pollution decreased by 40%, unpurified water discharge by 20%, hard waste formation by 25%. To a greater extent, these changes may be explained by industrial stagnation.
Test 4.10.
Could you tell us what you understand by ecology?
As a science, ecology deals with the habits of living things, especially their relation to their environment. Although ecology is a relatively new science, there isn't a particular person who invented the discipline. Many of its concepts reach back to ancient times. Man has been interested in ecology from a practical point of view since the early ages. Even in the primitive society, every individual, in order to survive, had to have a certain amount of knowledge about the environment, the powers of nature, about the plants and animals which surrounded him. In fact, we can say that human civilization was formed when man learned to make use of fire and other means, which helped him to alter his habitat.
Professor, who were the first ecologists in your opinion?
The word ecology itself was coined by a German biologist Ernst Haeckel in 1869. But during the 19th and 20th centuries, a number of scientists contributed to its development. Among them I can name Gilbert White and Henry Thoreau, Eugene Odum, Rachel Carson, Barry Commoner, and many of their fellow ecologists. Eugene Odum, for instance, in the 1940s, led the way in drawing various doctrines together into a new science called ecosystem ecology. He saw the Earth, indeed the entire universe, as a series of interlocking ecosystems. In 1953, with the help of his brother and fellow ecologist Howard Odum, he published Fundamentals of Ecology, the first textbook in the field. The book, which has since appeared in numerous revised editions, secured ecosystem ecology's status as a discipline independent of biology and natural history.
I'd like to find out your opinion about pollution. Has pollution always been a feature of human society, or did it appear only 2 centuries ago?
There is a popular assumption that protecting our environment is merely a matter of aesthetics, that we can simply ignore environmental problems, provided we are willing to put up with a little ugliness. In essence, this position implies that the only really useful thing Earth does for us in this universe is to give us something solid to stand on. As a professional ecologist, I have found this attitude infinitely exasperating. Our planet was not built by people, nor did Earth come with a set of instructions and a team trained to implement them. Man always had to understand laws of nature and learn them. Pollution is not a new phenomenon, and has always been a feature of human society, but the concern about the preservation of nature evolved first at the time of the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century and has only increased today. In my opinion, environmentalism began to grab public attention during the late 1960s and 1970s, when people were eager not to gain a comprehensive vision of nature as a dynamic system, but to understand ways of coping with the growing pollution.
Why is the 20th century called the age of pollution?
Well, generally, we think of the 20th century as the age of pollution because the level of industry, the level of pollution increased at such a dramatic rate, and also people began to think about it more. I'm sure the 19th century also had lots and lots of pollution, but at that time, I think that people were generally poorer and more concerned with their daily lives, too concerned with those things to think about the larger picture of quality of life, that sort of thing.
It depends. We need to be aware of the fact that the ecosystems of the Earth are as integral to human existence as our circulatory and nervous systems are inseparable parts of our bodies. Earth's most important life support system is the natural environment. Natural areas such as oceans, grasslands, and forests, and to some extent cultivated lands, farms or managed woodlands, provide the food and most of the other physiological necessities of life. For instance, air purification, water recycling, soil enrichment, supporting the developed environments, cities, roads, railways, airports, and industrial areas. Basic laws of nature remain the same, but the population has increased, and consequently, its growth has produced a drastic influence on the health of the environment.
Overpopulation and continuing pollution remain a major threat. but other threats include excessive use of fossil fuel and other resources, and gaps in income, food, and education between the haves and have-nots. Perhaps the most serious threat arises from a too narrow conception of economics, in which non-market goods and services like those provided by natural ecosystems are severely undervalued. All of us need ammunition in the battle against eco-ignorance. We need the earth for its natural areas, those life support systems that keep us alive and healthy.
Test 4.11.
The Naturalist's Summer Evening Walk by Gilbert White. When day declining sheds a milder gleam, what time the mayfly haunts the pool or stream? When the still owl skims round the grassy mead, what time the timorous hare limps forth to feed? Then be the time to steal adown the vale, and listen to the vagrant cuckoo's tale, to hear the clamorous curlew call his mate, or the soft quail his tender pain relate, to see the swallow sweep the darkening plain, belated to support her infant train, to mark the swift in rapid giddy ring dash round the steeple unsubdued of wing. Amusive birds, say where you hit retreat when the frost rages and the tempests beat, whence you return by such nice instinct led, when spring soft season lifts her bloomy head. Such baffled searches mock man's prying pride. The God of nature is your secret guide. While deepening shades obscure the face of day, to yonder bench, leaf-sheltered let us stray, till blended objects veil the swimming sight, and all the facing landscape sings in night. To hear the drowsy daw come brushing by, with buzzing wing, or the shrill cricket cry, to see the feeding bat glance through the wood, to catch the distant falling of the flood, while over the cliff the wakened churn owl hung, through the still gloom protracts his chattering song, while high in air, and poised upon his wings, unseen the soft enarmoured woodlark sings. These nature's works the curious mind employ, inspire a soothing melancholy joy. As fancy warms, a pleasing kind of pain steals over the cheek and thrills the creeping vein. Each rural sight, each sound, each smell combine, the tinkling sheep bell or the breath of kine, the new mown hay that scents the swelling breeze, or cottage chimney smoking through the trees. The chilling night dews fall, away, retire, for see, the glowworm lights her amorous fire. Thus over night's veil had half obscured the sky, the impatient damsel hung her lamp on high. True to the signal, by love's meteor led, Leander hastens to his hero's bed.
Test 4.12.
The biography of Gilbert White. Gilbert White was an 18th century English naturalist and clergyman, who is often regarded as Britain's first ecologist. His observations of nature were collected in a book, which is now considered a classic of English literature on natural history. He was born on July 18th, 1720 in the village of Selborne, an attractive place in the beautiful Hampshire countryside. He was the eldest son in the family with strong religious traditions. In February 1728, the family moved to the Wakes, the small house where Gilbert White spent most of his life, refusing various other places of residence in order to remain in his beloved birthplace. Gilbert received his school education at Basingstoke, where from 1729 to 1739 he attended a grammar school and developed his interests in theology, history, and literature. As a university student, he received both a bachelor's and a master's degree from Oxford. In December 1739, Gilbert was admitted at Oriel College and took his degree of Bachelor of Arts in June 1743. He became Master of Arts in October 1746. His family expected him to pursue a career in the church, so after graduating from Oriel College in Oxford, Gilbert White became a priest at the Wakes parish. following his full ordination in the Anglican Church in 1751. Gilbert White went to serve as curate at Selborne and nearby parishes. But throughout all his life, Gilbert White maintained close links with the University of Oxford. In March 1744, he was elected Fellow of Oriel College and remained in this position for 50 years. In April 1752, he was admitted one of the senior proctors of the university. Being of an ambitious temper and strongly attached to the charms of rural scenery, White quitted residence at Oxford in 1758, the year when he inherited the Wakes from his uncle, and settled permanently at Selborne with the intention of pursuing his literary occupations, and especially the study of nature. Selborne and its delightful neighbourhood became the centre of White's world, the centre of his life's work of zoological research and observation. Since the early 1750s, he began his serious study of botany, native animal species, their behaviour and their habitats. He studied mammals, bats, reptiles, especially his pet tortoise Timothy, insects, plants, and weather. White's keenest interest was in birds, whose song and habitats he studied. Other ornithologists at the time interested themselves only in plumage and anatomy. He meticulously recorded his observations of all these aspects of nature in diaries and letters to other naturalists. Later he organized these into what he named his garden calendar and a naturalist's journal. In 1789, all his observations and a collection of his correspondence with fellow naturalists were combined into a unique book, The Natural History and Antiquities of Selborne. The book instantly gathered a wide reputation and became popular both with the general public and scientists. Charles Darwin read it with enthusiasm as a boy and later found in it some evidence for his theory of evolution of species. The book went through many editions and remains a classic in scientific writing, noted for its highly literary style. White's main aims were to persuade readers to pay more attention to the wonders around them and to advance their knowledge of the variety of life. Gilbert White spent most of his life in his native village in Hampshire, becoming curate in charge there in 1784. He died in 1793 at the Wakes. He lived the quietest life, but he succeeded in gaining the attention of all the prominent naturalists of the 18th century.
Test 4.13.
Interview with Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. Tell us about your job.
Sure. I was asked by the Australian Reptile Park and the Commonwealth Serum Laboratory to collect some big sea snakes. The world supply of anti-serum is running low, and a heck of a lot of people die every year of sea snake bites, especially in Asian waters. Besides, since the early 80s, my whole life has revolved around trapping and relocating rogue, or so-called problem crocodiles.
What is a rogue crocodile?
A rogue is a crocodile that must be removed because it is threatening to people. That's how it's stated, but in actual fact we believe if we didn't catch it, it'd be shot or snared in a net. So before this would happen, we'd go up, trap and relocate the crocs. It's very unfortunate for the croc. You can see how the conflict between man and beast occurs, but certainly people are not on their menu. Every now and then someone makes the mistake of choosing to swim with them, and the crocs have eaten the occasional person, on an average of 1 or 2 per year in Australia.
How do most farmers react to crocodiles near their livestock?
We just finished a documentary on this absolutely beautiful croc, and I won't tell you too much since you'll be seeing the documentary shortly, but it's a very emotional story of how he's rehabilitated after he had a fight with another croc. I think this documentary is the one that will really tell the crocodile story, and finally people are going to be really able to feel compassion towards this animal that has always been considered deadly. Learning to live with dangerous animals is not that difficult.
You're living proof of that, certainly. How many dangerous animals have you come into contact with in your life?
Easily thousands. For example, just before this interview, I was in with a 10-foot croc building a ramp. I've got a person riding shotgun, as we call it. Actually, he has no gun at all. He's just up there staring at the water, watching for any movement so that I can get out. It's not dangerous. It certainly is no more that if I were an electrician, I'd go through a certain amount of training to learn just about how dangerous electricity is if you're careless. For me dealing with crocs all of my life, I feel very okay with them. I'm at one with them. What looks dangerous is really not all that dangerous, simply because of the knowledge and expertise that I have acquired in the last 31 years. Unfortunately though, in northern waters of Australia, a lot of crocodiles get shot and dealt with in a rather harsh manner, because they've got the reputation of eating people. What we're seeing now, here, not so much just here, but globally, is a typical reaction to a large predatory animal. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest crocodiles on the planet, and largest reptile in the world. Through our educational programs, animals that seem dangerous are being seen with a new respect. Australians and other people in countries that do have crocodiles and alligators should be very, very proud of them. We don't have lions or tigers or bears here in Australia, but we do have crocodiles, and what we do have is a heck of a lot of pride in that. Crocodiles should be seen as the king of all Australian animals.
What is the number one for you on your list of environmental concerns?
Our biggest concern right now is preserving the habitat of our reptiles in order to protect them as a species. Conservation of habitat, along with educating and convincing people that it is possible to live alongside so-called dangerous animals, is our goal. In some ways we would like to create in all Australians the same kind of respect that the Aborigines of this continent have always had for animal life. It is the Aborigines who helped us recently to locate and protect a very small mouse called the yellow-footed Antechinus, because they are so very knowledgeable.
Are crocodiles very intelligent?
Some people think they're very dumb, like a frog or something, but when you get a perspective on their environment and understand that crocodiles have been on the planet for 65 million years, it's their instincts that I would consider to be their intelligence. In fact, they are very intelligent. They have great eye for detail in their environment and are certainly very aware of things in that environment.
.9. Listen to the conversation and act it out.
At the library.
Good afternoon. How can I help you?
Good afternoon. I've just joined the library, and I want to know how many books I can take out.
You can take 5 books and keep them for a week. After that, if you have finished them, you return them. If you haven't finished, you can renew them.
How shall I do that? Must I visit the library?
No, you needn't. You can telephone. Tell us the titles of the books and the date they are due for return.
Splendid. Can you tell me where to find books on art? I'm interested in English architecture.
You can look up books in our architectural section. You might be interested in our new arrival about Sir Christopher Wren. Shall I bring it to you?
Yes, please. It's very kind of you.
5.10. A. Street entertainer.
What might this be?
It might be a person imitating a statue.
What should you do to make the person move?
You must put some money in the pot.
Why would this person want to do this?
He may be very good at standing still for long periods of time.
How should he prepare to do this?
He must paint himself white and put on a white robe and headscarf.
What should he not do?
He must not move unless money is put in the pot.
B.
The painter.
What could this man be painting?
He could be painting the shops or the cathedral.
Why might he be painting the buildings?
He might be painting the buildings to sell the pictures to the tourists.
Why should the tourists want to buy his paintings?
Tourists may want to have a souvenir to remind them of the place they visited.
The tourists may prefer to buy a postcard or take a photograph.
Tourists who collect artworks may prefer to own an original painting.
Would it not be difficult for the tourists to take paintings home?
The artist should roll the painting and put it in a cardboard tube to protect it.
C. The stonemason.
What might this man be doing?
He may be carving a figure.
What material might he be using if he is a stonemason?
He should be using stone.
Where might he find the stone?
He ought to be able to buy it from the local quarry.
What could his carvings be used for?
They may be used to decorate buildings, or perhaps as garden ornaments.
Why might this man have chosen to sculpt in the street?
He must want to collect money, either to live on or to buy materials.
Why should the man wear sunglasses?
He must protect his eyes from stone chips.
5.11. Listen to the poems and say what mood they express. Discuss the questions in Task 11 on page 284. Practice reading the poems with a tape, then learn them by heart.
If we might have a second chance to live the days once more and rectify mistakes we've made, to even up the score, if we might have a second chance to use the knowledge gained, perhaps we might become at last as fine as God ordained. But though we can't retrace our steps, however stands the score, tomorrow brings another chance for us to try once more. We do not do what we ought not to, we do, and lean upon the thought that chance will bring us through. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can.
Task 5.12. In Task 15, on page 287, choose the right grammatical form, then listen to the recording and act out the suggested situations. A. Wire models.
May I have a look at the wire models?
Yes, but you must not touch them.
Can you tell me what they're made from?
They may be made of metal wire.
Can they really only be made from one piece of wire?
It ought to be possible, if the wire is bent many times.
What might this one be?
It might be a cat.
B. The town crier and the musician.
Hello, could I have one of those leaflets?
Yes, of course you may.
Our band will be busking in the street today. Where should we set up our instruments?
You ought to set up on the corner so the most people can see you.
Will the noise of our band interfere with your crying?
No, it should not, as I will be situated at the other end of the street.
Would you be kind enough to introduce our band once we are ready?
I should be delighted to.
What other things might you be announcing today?
I must announce the town fete which begins this afternoon.
C. Painted faces.
Look what my parents did at the weekend. I can't understand why they had their faces painted. Why might they want to do this?
Well, they might have been going to a fancy dress party.
They should not have done it when I was with them in London for the day.
They must have thought it was a good idea at the time.
They did not consider what people would think of them on the way home.
Yes, so what might have happened if it rained?
It may have been difficult to remove the paint when they wanted to take it off.
It should not be difficult to remove it with soap and hot water.
How would you have felt if it had been your parent?
I might have thought it was fun at first, but may have been embarrassed if my friends saw us.
Well, I still can't understand why they wanted to do it.
Task 5.13. Listen to the recording about the art of John Constable and fill in the gaps with the information missing in Task 6 on page 292 in your course book.
John Constable, the son of a wealthy miller, initially had a reputation of a slow developer and often suffered from his family's disapproval of his vocation as an artist. Although he joined the Royal Academy Schools as a student in 1799, he gained universal acclaim after the exhibition in London in 1824. Together with Richard Parkes Bonington and Joseph Mallord William Turner, he was largely responsible for introducing a new approach to landscape painting that was to have a great influence on European art. Those three artists brought to landscape painting respect for location, a belief that the commonplace was worth painting, and that changing atmospheric effects, light and weather, were an essential part of the landscape. John Constable was a remarkable painter of English scenes. His subjects are the places that he knew and loved, the country landscapes of Suffolk, Dedham, Salisbury, and Hampstead. Throughout his life, he enjoyed a quiet, open-air existence, firm in the conviction that nature was the clearest revelation of God's presence. Sheaves of hay, hedges, trees, and streams were the stimulus of divine contemplation and worship. In his small oil studies, as opposed to large canvases intended for the Academy exhibitions, Constable concentrated on changing effects of light and atmosphere. His studies and depiction of clouds and rivers seem to spill over the edges of the sheet. They move rapidly and unexpectedly in every direction, within a space that seems totally free and infinite. Constable used chiaroscuro to dramatic effects, transforming his tranquil rural scenes with the shadows created by the clouds. His vibrant brushstrokes fill the canvas with light and vitality. In 1829, Constable was made a full academician, and the last years of his life were largely spent in consolidating his reputation by the publication of a series of engravings. He also took to lecturing on the subject of the history and practice of landscape.
Task 5.14. Look at the pictures on pages 300 to 302 for some time. Then listen to Eva Horvat's questions about Russian landscape painting and painters on the tape and try to answer them. Stop the tape after each question and take turns in answering them.
Oh, I was looking at some pictures, and I was wondering, what period in the history of Russian art do all these paintings date back to? Was landscape painting the most popular genre at that time? Did these painters belong to one artistic circle, or did they work on their own? To me, the composition of the painting by Kuinje looks rather strange. The artist must have been exceptionally bold in cutting the birch trunks from above by the frame. Wouldn't you say so? In Kuinje's picture, The Birch Grove, the green glade is lit by a dazzling sun. How did the painter manage to achieve such a natural sunlight effect? The precision of details in the painting of vegetation in the forefront of Ivan Shishkin's picture is amazing. The green, sun-warmed carpet looks almost photo-like. Why was it so important for the artist to focus our attention on it? I've just had a thought that the skyline in all these four paintings is as important for the expression of the state of nature as the landscapes themselves. Would you agree, or do you see it differently? Savrasov's rainbow is marked by some special spirituality. What helped the artist to achieve this effect? The subject of the painting, the color scheme, or the ability of the artist to penetrate into the beauty of life and understand its changeability? There's a popular belief that natural environment influences national character. Is there anything in Russian character that is reflected in the canvases by Shishkin, Savrasov, or Vasilyev? Are there any other well-known paintings by the same artist? Where are they exhibited? Do any of them appeal to you?
Task 5.15. Listen to an art gallery guide describing the medieval art period. Copy out the table in Task 8 on page 313 in your course book and fill it in.
During the Middle Ages, the greatest influence on European art was the Christian religion. Most European paintings were made for Christian churches. Noble families and churchmen often had their family chapels and altars where the priest celebrated the Mass, decorated with fine painting. Artists could not paint whatever picture they wanted and expect someone to buy it. Instead, they were usually paid to paint a particular painting, such as an altarpiece for a church. For their paintings, artists used egg tempera, which was powdered colours mixed with egg yolk. The pictures often showed events from the life of Jesus Christ, such as birth, or as a baby with his mother, the Virgin Mary. Some pictures showed stories about saints, such as Saint George and the Dragon. Medieval paintings like these were used to teach people who could neither read nor write about the Bible and important events in the history of Christianity. It was also meant to help people concentrate on their prayers, and it must have made a splendid sight in the dark church as all the gold decoration glittered and glowed in the candlelight. The people in religious paintings were not painted to look realistic. The artists concentrated on the religious meaning of their pictures. They dressed saints in certain clothes and colours and gave them symbols, such as a lion or a flower, by which people could recognise them. The Holy Family was usually pictured in the centre of paintings with saints on either side. People also like to have religious paintings in their homes to help them concentrate on their prayers, and if they had money, they could order a painting being done for them. The patron, the person who ordered the picture, drew up a contract with the painter setting out the subject, the size and price, the amount of gold to be used and the quality of the colours. There to be no cheating with cheap materials.
Unit 6. The Young Leaders Club. Task 6.1. The word leadership has recently become a buzzword all over the world. What are the reasons for it? Listen to the speakers on the tape and tick the reasons they mention in the appropriate boxes in Task 1 on page 324. Speaker 1.
I believe that leadership is influence. Anytime you try to influence the behavior of another person, you are engaging in an act of leadership. It usually involves influencing employees, members, or followers of some sort to carry out the goals of the company, organization, or group. As the number of small businesses is growing across the globe, the issue of leadership is becoming more acute. On the other hand, there is an obvious increase of managerial positions in large-scale industry.
Speaker 2.
Many are saying that the society and our world is going through a transformation or a paradigm shift. Our institutions and organizations are changing. They are less hierarchic, autocratic, and controlling. The old style of leadership, based on the leaders holding the control and making decisions, is outdated. The new style values the individual and is based on creating a vision of change, and on learning and acquiring knowledge to realize the vision. The new leadership style focuses on the value of people and emphasizes empowering people.
Speaker 3.
As I see it, leadership is not just about reaching organizational goals, but increasing personal development. The very word leader has acquired a new meaning in the past decade. People are becoming more aware of global issues, and it is important not only to work in communities, but to develop others. Anyone within an organization, an administrator, worker, parent, or volunteer who has the necessary knowledge, skills, and tools can be a leader. He or she can impact and develop the organization or the people in it through his or her creativity and other actions.
Speaker 4.
Have you ever thought that true leadership is based not only on some inborn talent of an individual, but to a greater extent on the individual's understanding that leadership presupposes positive cooperation on behalf of all members of the organization? Leadership is a collective process. One of the major differences between a true leader and a selfish career builder is rooted in the understanding of this issue. Growing social awareness, the pursuit of collective goals, make the subject of leadership more and more popular.
Task 6.2. Learn to be positive. On the tape, you're going to hear Professor Claire Fletcher speak about her ideas on how to turn a person's weaknesses into strengths. Listen to the recording and answer the questions in Task 11 on page 329.
If you imagine your life as a journey, then what are the forces that are helping you move forward, making it worthwhile, and preventing you from being stuck? What helps you to be confident, choose appropriate goals, and see which situations in life you can handle well? My answer to all these questions is your own qualities, your strong points. It is rather important to be aware of things about you that you feel are positive. Likewise, it is important to realize that there are no such things as weaknesses. This is my philosophy, and I'd like to share it with you. The core idea is that there are no such things as weaknesses at all, only qualities that are out of balance. In fact, strengths and weaknesses are a balancing act, and it is rather important for any person to realize it. A quality becomes a strength when it is right for you and the situation. A quality becomes a weakness when it is either overdone or underdone for you and the situation. For example, being flexible is considered to be a strength, but if you overdo being flexible, you become aimless, which could become a weakness, and vice versa. If you underdo being flexible, you become rigid in your thinking, which could also become a weakness. Being impatient is a weakness, but underlying it is a great quality, your energy and enthusiasm to get on with things. It's just gone too far for one day. Once you have found the potential strength that is being underdone or overdone, you will be able to see what kind of action you could take. For instance, if you suspect your interest in other people overdoes itself to become nosiness, then observe yourself and stop yourself asking extra questions to satisfy your curiosity. If you see that your lack of confidence means you appear timorous or fearful, find small things with which to push yourself a bit further than you would normally go. If your mind goes a complete blank when you try to define your own strengths, ask someone who knows you well how they see you. Often it is easier for other people to see your strengths than it is for you to see your own. But remember, other people's views are just opinions. They may not have it right. Get a second opinion on any doubtful ones.
Task 6.3. Listen to the tape and check your answers for filling in the gaps with the appropriate articles in Task 4 on page 333 in your course book.
Parliament is the most important law-making body of the British people. Since 1512, the Palace of Westminster has been the seat of the two Houses of Parliament, called the Lords and the Commons. The House of Lords is the upper house of the British Parliament. It consists of nearly 1,200 non-elected members, Lords Spiritual and Lords Temporal. Its work includes examining and revising bills from the Commons, discussing important matters which the Commons cannot find time to debate. The House usually sits for 4 days a week and has an average daily attendance of 380 peers. The Commons is a short name for the House of Commons, which is the lower house of the British Parliament. The Commons is made up of elected members of Parliament, MPs, of different parties. Usually it consists of 657 elected MPs. The party with the most MPs forms the government, and its leader becomes Prime Minister. MPs from other parties make up the opposition. The main purpose of the House of Commons is to formulate legislation which is first debated in both houses before becoming a law. The House sits for 5 days a week. Each sitting is in the afternoon and may go on throughout the night.
Task 6.4. Listen to the tape and check your answers for filling in the gaps with the appropriate words and word combinations from the box in Task 2 on page 335 in your course book.
Election in Britain. Britain is divided into 650 political areas, which are known as constituencies or seats. Each constituency is represented in the House of Commons by an MP, who is elected by people in the constituency. At general elections, the people of Britain who are aged over 18 vote to choose who will serve in the House of Commons and which party will form the government. The main political parties choose a candidate to fight for a seat in each constituency. So in each constituency, people usually have several candidates to choose from. Each of them represents a different political party. People vote by putting a cross by the name of one of the candidates on the ballot papers. The person who is elected, has been elected for each constituency, is the one who gains the most votes within that constituency. When voting is completed, the political party that has won the most votes is asked to form a government, and that party's leader becomes Prime Minister. The longest time that any political party can run is 5 years, but the Prime Minister has the power to call an election at any point within this period.
Task 6.5. Copy the table on Task 2 on page 342 in your notebook. Then listen to the recording of 2 interviews with young campaigners and fill it in. Interview 1.
The homeless helper. Sade Salami, 19, works for Centrepoint, a London homeless charity. She has lived in hostels since she was 14 and now talks to teenagers about her experience. What's your campaign about?
I'm a peer educator. I work with Centrepoint and go into schools and talk to young people about homelessness. We want to show people that homelessness is not all about drugs and prostitution.
Why did you get involved?
I left home due to family problems, and although I've never actually slept rough, I've been in the hostel system for about 3 years, and I know how isolated and low being homeless can make you feel.
What do you do?
We go into classes from year 9 to year 11 and talk about ourselves, do role plays, and answer any questions. We're also making a documentary so that the scheme can be extended nationwide.
What's been the best moment?
The good thing is the satisfaction I get from knowing that I've helped people. Often, people wish me luck at the end of a session. Even some teachers have said to me, "You've really taught me something today."
What about the worst?
Once a boy said, "Homelessness will never affect me, and I'm not going to listen to you." It upset me a lot.
How far would you go for your beliefs?
Raising awareness is such a natural part of my life that there's no limit to it.
What are your plans for the future?
I'm studying A-level media and sociology. Long term, I want to set up a charity school and train people to do peer education.
Why should we support your campaign?
The world has a huge problem with homelessness. We need to start educating people about it.
Interview 2. The animal lover.
Haley Zarashi, 18, has been a member of the National Anti-Vivisection Society, NAVS, for 3 years. What's your campaign about?
NAVS wants to put a complete stop to testing on animals, for cosmetics as well as medical research. Some people work undercover in the lab, secretly filming the awful conditions that the animals are kept in, and then expose the company. I don't want to get involved with that. I think I'm too outspoken. I work more on the leafleting and publicity side.
Why did you get involved?
I've always loved animals, and when I was 13, I started learning about some of the awful stuff that happens to them in labs. They keep beagles in tiny cages. Their eyes are so sad, and they always breed too many and end up killing half of them anyway. It's totally barbaric. I did work experience with NAVS and decided to stay on and help afterwards.
What do you do for NAVS?
If I have any spare time, I call them and see if I can help out. If there's an event, I'll go along and hand out leaflets. I've also been on rallies and written a few articles for animal newspapers.
How does your family feel about it?
They don't really understand. All they do is tell me I should eat meat. I've been a veggie since I was 10.
What's been the campaign's best moment?
There have been lots. When we exported a circus that was maltreating its animals, NAVS got a lot of coverage, which was good.
How far would you go for your cause?
NAVS is a peaceful organization, but I like to get involved in the more active charities and do something like hunt protesting. I wouldn't want to get arrested, though.
What are your plans for the future?
I'm studying art and design, but I'll always be involved with NAVS for as long as they need me. It's not the sort of thing you can just leave and forget about.
Why should we support NAVS?
All campaigns and charities deserve time. I don't think you should campaign for animals and nothing else. Well, I suppose I do, but I'm just biased. I think everyone should try and help those who are helpless.
End of recordings. Unit 5. The Brush and Palette Club. Task 5.1. What is art? Why does man create works of art? What is the meaning of art? Listen to the recording and find out Anthony Jansen's views on these questions.
What is art? Why does man create it? Few questions provoke such heated debate and provide so few satisfactory answers. Surely one reason that man creates is because of an irresistible desire to change himself and his environment in ideal form. Art represents its creator's deepest understanding and highest aspiration. At the same time, the artist often plays an important role as the articulator of shared beliefs. That is why a great work contributes to our vision of life and leaves us profoundly moved. A real masterpiece has this effect on many people and withstands the test of time. The record of man's earliest art is lost on us. Man has been walking the earth for some 2 million years, but the earliest prehistoric art that we know of was made only about 25,000 years ago. Who were the first artists? In all likelihood, they were shamans. They were believed to have divine powers of inspiration and unique ability to penetrate the unknown and express it through art. Even today, the artist remains a magician whose work can mystify and move us, an embarrassing fact to civilized man, who does not readily give up his superficial appearance of rational control. Truly, art enables us to communicate our understanding in ways that cannot be expressed otherwise. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, not only in its descriptive value, but also in its symbolic significance. In art, as in language, man is above all the inventor of symbols to convey complex thoughts in new ways. We must think of art not in terms of everyday prose, but as poetry. A painting suggests much more than it states, and like a poem, the value of art lies equally in what it says and how it says it. Art has been called a visual dialogue, for it expresses its creator's imagination just as surely as if he was speaking to us, though the object itself is mute. This dialogue, however, requires our active participation. If we cannot literally talk to a work of art, we can at least learn how to respond to it. The process is similar to learning a foreign language. We must learn the style and outlook of a country, period, and artist, if we are to understand the work properly. It would seem, therefore, that we cannot escape viewing works of art in the context of time and circumstance. How indeed could it be otherwise? So as long as art is still being created all around us, opening our eyes almost daily to new experiences and thus forcing us to readjust our sight.
Task 5.2. Listen to some students sharing their experience of visiting an art gallery or a museum. Was it an enjoyable experience for all of them? Which of these students sounds disappointed? Why?
The gallery I went to was the New Tate Modern Art Gallery in London. The main gallery building used to be a power station, and all the art is housed in spacious halls. It contains a fine collection of new modern art, mainly English, contemporary works by Damien Hirst, Tracy Emin. There's been a flux of modern artists emerging in the British scene, causing a big stir around world art, and the New Tate Modern was really built to house these new and exciting British artists mainly, and their new contemporary movement. All kinds of art are housed in the building, installation art, classical paintings, sculptures. It's a very contemporary and eclectic mix of artworks. Another gallery that I went to that I enjoyed was the Salvador Dali Museum in Barcelona. I'm not a particular fan of Dali, but to go and see the art housed how it's supposed to be, it's a marvellous exhibition of painting. The building is lined with great gold statues, and some of the paintings are so big, they're really big. In Russia, my favorite museum so far has to be the Pushkin. The collection includes works by Van Gogh, Picasso, Renoir, some of my personal favorite artists. The exhibition I was most disappointed about was the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. For me, it was too big and too classical, and there was not enough for me contemporary art to interest me. The bulk of the collection is anything that interested me was impossible to find. It was the building was so long and gigantic, really, and very difficult to find your way around, especially for a tourist like myself. So I was disappointed by it, and the only works I could find were the classical works, which I'm not particularly interested in. When constructing a gallery, it's important to consider tourists. I often find when visiting some of the museums that they only cater for the regional visitors. So if it's a Russian museum for Russians or an English museum for English people, which is not true. People come from all over the world to visit these museums, and there needs to be ways of helping tourists come around so that everyone can view the art and understand the art and enjoy it.
It's been 3 years already since I visited Madame Tussauds in London. I went there with a group of international students, and as it had been praised greatly by many people, I really looked forward to seeing wax figures of world-famous celebrities. The museum building is situated in Baker Street, not far from the house of Sherlock Holmes. So, as we approached the building, I saw thousands of people, mainly foreign students from different language schools, queuing to get into the museum. And it was not free of charge, as you can guess. The entrance fee is about £12 per student. So imagine what we felt having not only to pay for the entrance, but also having to stand in the queue for our own money. Luckily, our activity manager found a way out of the situation. We decided to jump the queue by going to the planetarium first, which is next door to the museum, and is connected to it inside. The idea is that after you have enjoyed looking at the star galaxy, you can go to the museum itself, without any queuing and any extra pay. So that was our plan, and we did so. In fact, I was impressed by the space show, but still was eager to get into Madame Tussauds. When the show was over, we all rushed to see the world of wax figures. Though the collection is housed in spacious halls, the first impression you get is that you are down in the underground in the rush hour, as it is the only time where you can find so many people. However, only half of what you see is real. The other half is a fake or wax figures. The exhibits range from pop singers to the Queen and her family. Everything is mixed up, that is, you can find sportsmen, singers and politicians in one hall. The museum provides guided tours, but if you go on your own, you are able to get only a glimpse of everything, or I should say everyone. What really struck me was that on the upper floor you could see the history of wax production started by Madame Tussauds long time ago. You can find various parts of bodies lying on different shelves, and if you don't expect to see it, it can be really scary. I was disgusted to see all the dismembered parts. Then, everyone proceeds to the lower floor, where you get on the carriage, and just like in a time machine, you are taken to see the history of Britain. I enjoyed it not only because I didn't have to walk, but also because as we passed by a certain historical period, we got the feeling of reality. Actually, the events are arranged chronologically, and it is a good way of getting to know a bit of British history, provided you're attentive and have a piece of paper and a pen at hand. Well, on the whole, my impression of this museum was somewhat dubious. On the one hand, I understand that it is hard work to make all the wax figures and to dress them. But on the other hand, at a closer look, you see that they are far from being perfect. You can easily tell whether it's a human being or a wax being. Though I must admit that I like the history lesson, and I advise everyone to visit this part of the exhibition. So enjoy your visit to Madame Tussauds, and do not forget about the planetarium.
My main interest in Russian art is a revolutionary art, and the way the artists were used to help the revolution, and as propaganda. Really, the artists were used as propaganda, which for me is a reverse of usually how artists work. Artists, in my opinion, should be free and outspoken and usually against a government, but for the revolutionists to be with the government and to be part of the media to display the revolution in such a way, it was very interesting for me. I'm particularly interested in revolutionary art. I found the wide variety of Russian artists, writers, poets, painters, sculptors. I also find this very interesting. There is an immense range of talent with Russian artists. There are no boundaries for them. You do not have to be a painter or a sculptor. You can be anything that you so wish to be, which I really enjoy. I found the Mayakovsky Museum really very interesting. His collection is arranged and installed in such a way as to leave a big impression on yourself as the viewer. It's very angry and very violent, a very intimidating environment to be in as an audience, and really, really very good installation. As an installation, it's important to make the audience feel something or feel some kind of way, and the Mayakovsky Museum certainly closed in on you almost, very claustrophobic and pointing at you and always down on you. Very, very good. I really liked the Mayakovsky Museum.
Test 5.3. Listen to a person talking about his favorite paintings and try to find them among the pictures on page 271.
This particular work of art, created in 1614, is very interesting. The rage of Christ as he is forcing these people away, these sinners perhaps, you can almost see on the faces of some of them the sin and the shame of Christ forcing them out here. Trading within a temple is obviously a sin under the law of God, and Christ has come here to drive out the sinners from his temple, people who are trading in a house of God. And so they are at the time of the painting, they're feeling his force, his wrath, as they're being removed from his house, if you like. There are some very rich and strong colours, almost to suggest that these people have money. There are bright yellows and bright oranges and greens, maybe used to suggest the wealth of these particular people. Christ himself has been painted in a very graceful way for a man who is contradictory. He's graceful yet filled with rage at the same time. A very interesting depiction of Jesus Christ here. My opinion is that the painting has been created to be thought-provoking, to move the viewer at that particular time into questioning themselves as particular sinners, whether they are the sinners and whether Christ is driving them from the temple perhaps. And this is perhaps the meaning behind the painting. I particularly like this painting. It's a very slow-paced painting, if you like. Not still, but slow-moving and very cheerful, almost. There's the scene of people waltzing around the street, high-class people, obviously, with fine dresses and fine clothes, swooning with their umbrellas and kind of, all smiling, but very interesting for a rainy day that everyone should have these umbrellas but still be very happy and very cheerful about their daily life. The painting has an interesting array of colours, very autumn colours, browns, dark greens, oranges, a very kind of fitting for the type of day with the umbrellas and the rain, okay. The gentle brushstrokes that Renoir has used here are very impressionistic, really very stylised of the time and a very contemporary for the time with his fellow artist, fellow colleague and artist of the world at the time. But are difficult to see in a copy. The original used no black, and there was only darker shades of particular colours, and this really creates an overall brighter sense of the picture, really brightens up for the viewer. There's no real blackness here. There is only light, perhaps, and dark colours. There's often a great difference between an original painting and a copy. It's much better to view a painting in its original form at a gallery. Colours are often faded, parts of the picture can often not be viewed, but it's always better to go and see an original. There are two small children here, sat behind perhaps an old pirate who is pointing out to sea. Two very innocent, small, but very finely dressed, very well presented children, juxtaposed with this very scruffy and perhaps a rugged pirate or fisherman. The boys are sat alongside a very rugged wall running alongside the coast, which is set against a very cloudy and very gloomy sky with seagulls flying across. The sailor is sat here on this rotted wood, perhaps, with a rusty anchor to the right of him. The artist brings a fisherman's figure nearer to the viewer. It looks strong and radiates strength. He's lit in a very interesting way, almost as if by treasure, by gold. It's an interesting lighting effect used here. At the same time, brighter and richer colours add to the fiery spirit of the fisherman's narration. The artist, with the precision of a photographer, depicted such small objects as stones, seashells, a model ship, an anchor. The bottom left hand of the picture here is maybe a toy boat, it looks as if, perhaps used by one of the children while they're listening to the stories of this sailor. Through the interest on one of the boys' faces, it is clear that the painter is maybe trying to get across the influence that this rugged sailor had on the small boy, considering what he went on to be in later life.
Task 5.4. Listen to the description of one picture again and fill in the missing parts in its description in Task 9 on page 272. Sir Walter Raleigh's childhood.
My first impressions of the painting date back to my school days. It used to hang in our classroom, and from my seat I could always have a glimpse of it. Later on I saw it in the gallery, but it still gripped my imagination. The canvas represents a scene from the childhood of Sir Walter Raleigh, the famous traveller, writer and explorer who brought to England many of the products we are so accustomed to nowadays. Tobacco plant, potatoes. Anyway, what you see in the picture doesn't give you any indication of the greatness of the figures portrayed. The painter showed the young Raleigh in the company of his friend at the seashore, listening intensely to the stories of a fisherman. Both boys are neatly dressed in the style of the age. The composition of the picture can be divided diagonally, making the lower right part bigger in proportion. The artist brings a fisherman's figure nearer to the viewer. It looks strong and radiates strength. At the same time, brighter and richer colours add to the fiery spirit of the fisherman's narration. The main focus of the other part of the picture is on the figure of the young Raleigh, his eyes, his grip of the hands, which testify to the boy's indulgence into the focus of the fisherman's story. Some minor details of the picture are interesting to be observed. The artist, with the precision of a photographer, depicted such small objects as stones, seashells, a model ship, an anchor. The sea in the background looks serene, as if giving an indication that the young explorer still has time for the conquering of its vastness. The painting has always appealed to me by its mood. It creates a feeling of greatness, of expectation, and its inspirational character reminded me of Britain's hard-won role as the mistress of the world's oceans.
Task 5.5. Listen to the recording and answer the questions in Task 13 on page 273 in your course book.
Constable Clouds. This summer, the National Gallery of Scotland pays tribute to the work of John Constable, one of the greatest of all landscape painters. This is the first major Constable exhibition in Britain to be shown outside London and features over 75 works by this great English artist. Constable memorably described the sky as the chief organ of sentiment in his pictures, and this exciting and extremely beautiful exhibition presents a comprehensive exploration of his cloud studies and of those landscapes reflecting his interest in the sky. Constable's romantic view of nature very much accorded with the spirit of his times and concerns of contemporary poets such as William Wordsworth. However, Constable was also informed by a knowledge of contemporary meteorological science and cloud types. This aspect of scientific inquiry adds an extra dimension to our perception of his work and is a powerful complement to the emotional power of his painting. The exhibition includes many of his most stunning oil sketches painted at various periods of his career. One of the centrepieces of the show will be the National Gallery of Scotland's own The Vale of Dedham, a magnificent panorama of Constable country, originally shown at the London Royal Academy in 1828. The scenery of Suffolk, Weymouth, Salisbury, Hampstead and Brighton is depicted in a bewildering variety of light effects brought about by the ever-changeable and fickle British weather. All the exhibited works are fully illustrated in the accompanying catalogue, which contains essays by a distinguished team of scholars.
5.6. On the tape you will hear a poem by John Betjeman, Meditation on a Constable Picture. Listen to the recording and say what the general mood of the poem is. What scene is depicted in Constable's painting? Listen to the recording again and practice reading out loud.
Meditation on a Constable Picture. Go back in your mind to that Middlesex Heights, when Constable painted the breeze and the light, as down out of Hampstead descended the chaise, to the wide-spreading valley half hidden in haze. The slums of St. Giles, St. Mary's Bones Farms, and Chelsea's and Battersea's riverside charms. The Palace of Westminster, towers of the Abbey, and Mayfair so elegant, Soho so shabby. The mansions where lilac hangs over brown brick, the ceiling whose plaster is floral and thick, the new stucco terraces facing the park, the odorous alleyways, narrow and dark. The hay barges sailing, the watermen rowing, on the Thames and embanked which was wide and slow going, the street cries rebounding from pavements and walls, and steeple surrounded the dome of St. Paul's. No market, nor high street, nor square was the same in that cluster of villages, London by name. Ere slabs are too tall, and we cockneys too few, let us keep what is left of the London we knew.
5.7. William Wordsworth, composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3rd, 1802.
Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning. Silent, bare, ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt, a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still.
5.8.
What exactly is a summer fine arts camp?
Campers with an aptitude in visual or performing arts spend a week in a traditional summer camp setting, enrolled in a fine arts major project with exposure to other elective arts disciplines.
What will be offered?
Major project offerings are theater arts, visual arts, dance and instrumental music, and a full range of outdoor recreation and camp activities. Elective classes will include special projects from a variety of disciplines.
Who may attend?
Any student currently enrolled in grades 5 through 11 may apply with a letter of recommendation from a teacher or arts professional.
What will a camper's day be like?
Each day includes 4 to 5 hours of class time in the student's major interest area, elective arts classes, hiking, nature programs, camp-wide games, and other outdoor recreation, and community meals and campfire programs, The final day of each camp session will offer a multidisciplinary performance open to the public.
Who will administer the camp and teach students?
Professional camp management, directed by an active community board, runs the camp. Professional artists and arts teachers develop curriculum and teach classes. Camp counselors are selected from college and high school graduate fine arts students. All staff members are subject to background checks and are trained to provide a safe, fun environment.